Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council. Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. City Manager Isaiah Hughley. Pop Barnes, District 1. Glenn Davis, District 2. Bruce Huff, District 3. Evelyn Turner Pugh, Mayor Pro Tem and District 4. Mike Baker, District 5. Gary Allen, District 6. Mimi Woodson, District 7. Tom Buck, District 8. Judy Thomas, Post 9 at-large counselor. Skip Henderson, Post 10 at-large counselor. Tiny Washington, Clerk of Council. And City Attorney Clifton Fay. Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the June 9th meeting of the Columbus City Council. We're so glad to have you here. Fasten your seatbelts. Today's going to be a long one. We're going to have budget issues and all sorts of good government going on for you all today. So let's go ahead and get started. Every time we come together, as you know, we get started on the right foot of community contemplation and prayer, and we're going to have Reverend Dr. Carolyn Carlisle come forward with Hosley Monumental CME Church. It's so good to have you come to the podium here, and I think this is the first time we've had you with us. Yes, well, we're so glad to have you, and she's rocking it at Hosley Monumental, and she's going to provide the invocation consistent with your faith tradition. Welcome.
Thank you. Shall we pray? Almighty and everlasting God, we thank you for your grace and your mercy. Here it is again, God, that we assemble in your presence, and we thank you that you're God and you're a compassionate God. And so now, God, we invoke the presence of the Holy Spirit in this chamber. We ask that you would saturate it with your Holy Spirit so that when these young men and young women get tired and weary, that the power of the Holy Spirit would empower them to do your will and the work that you have set before them. And we'll be ever so careful to give you all the glory, honor, and praise with thanksgiving. In Jesus' name we pray, your Son, but our Savior. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so very much, and thank you for what you and Hosley Monumental do for this community. We greatly appreciate it. We usually have some helpers, but I don't see Joyful Journey here today. Hopefully, do we have any word if they're caught up in security? Have there been any sign of a bunch of little ones down there? Okay. Well, what we'll do is I think we'll muddle through on our own if you all will stand and join with us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, as you know, we're just finishing up our budget season. And so we're going to have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights public hearing, which has been published in the newspaper and is required pursuant to law. We're going to have the Finance Director, now Deputy City Manager, Pam Hodge, come forward and conduct that hearing for us. Good morning.
Good morning. This is the first of 3 required public hearings for the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. The ad was in the paper last week, and there's another ad in the paper today for next week's public hearings. This relates to the rollback rate, the millage rate being higher than the rollback rate, and what that means is the total amount of taxes that are being collected citywide are more than last year, and that's due to the increase in the digest, not a change in the millage rate. So for those homeowners who have been in their home and have homestead exemption, there will be no change in their taxes, no change in the millage rate. So at this time, we'll open it up to the public.
Great, thank you. And we will, Mr. City Attorney, are there any formal announcements that need to be made other than those?
No, Mayor, this is a hearing under OCGA 48.532.1, and anybody is allowed to speak if they want to on the tentative millage rate, but if we don't see any hands, we can go on and conclude the hearing.
All right, anyone that would like to speak regarding the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and the millage rate? Okay. All right.
There'll be two other hearings just like this one, where people have a chance to speak, one at 6 p.m. today and one at 9 a.m. next week.
Great, thank you. And we have a special presentation at the start of our agenda today. We usually have a proclamation session, as you all know, and a resolution session, but every now and then we have something special that falls in between. We want to catch it before the summer break and everybody gets out of town. And so we're going to have Counselor Judy Thomas present a special proclamation for Ms. Cheryl Green Day. If you would come forward, she's the Muskogee County Teacher of the Year. Ms. Day, if you'd come forward to the podium, and Counselor Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. I am honored this morning wearing two hats, one as a counselor and one as the chair of the Muskogee Educational Excellence Foundation, which is the organization that recognizes the Teachers of the Year throughout the Muskogee County School District. Just as an aside, for some of you who may know our friend Ross Hunter from the Civic Center, his wife, who teaches at Downtown Elementary, was one of the top 10. So we have one of our own who was in the running for this. But I am so pleased to honor Cheryl this morning. Cheryl Green teaches at Jordan, my alma mater. And we're going to present this. And then, Mayor, you said the start of the summer, Cheryl's on her way to the beach as soon as this is over. So if they scoot out, you'll know why. But Cheryl, it's with a great deal of pleasure that I read this proclamation into the record. Whereas the Muskogee Educational Excellence Foundation selected Cheryl Green of Jordan High as the 2015 Muskogee County School District Teacher of the Year at a gala honoring 56 Teacher of the Year honorees, and where she was chosen the most outstanding representative of the teaching faculty of Muskogee County School District. And whereas Cheryl teaches dual enrollment classes with college credit accepted by Columbus Technical College in English and literature, and every student in her class is on track to receive those credits. And whereas she wears many hats and also teaches 10th grade literature, she is the yearbook advisor and the girls' soccer coach at Jordan. And whereas before coming to Jordan High School in 2013, Cheryl taught at Hardaway High School and has had the experience of teaching in Vienna, Austria for 2 years, as well as several years in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Social Circle, Georgia. And whereas Cheryl articulated a clear vision for the community and a message to the nation as Teacher of the Year from Muskogee County in espousing the creation of a culture where young people feel they matter and believe that no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And whereas Cheryl has an outstanding talent in her ability to collaboratively engage the entire classroom in critical thinking, pursuing the meaning and power of words through analytical thought, drawing the students into discussion through their own views and experiences, thereby sharpening their understanding as steel sharpens steel, to hone an ongoing desire to learn and embrace a future where they will have a meaningful significance. And whereas the students, teachers, and all citizens of Columbus, Georgia, salute Cheryl Green, the 2015 Muskogee County Teacher of the Year. Now, therefore, Teresa Pike Tomlinson, Mayor of Columbus, Georgia, does hereby proclaim June 9th, 2015 as Cheryl Green Day. Congratulations, Cheryl.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Cheryl, please say a few words.
It's not very often in a lifetime that we are acknowledged for our efforts as loudly and as boldly as I have been in the past few weeks. From Muskogee Educational Excellence Foundation to Muskogee County School District and now to the Columbus City Council. If I were not an English teacher, I would be at a loss for words in a situation like this. But as I tell my kids, never fear, Miss Green's here, and I do have just a few words to share. Last year, I was a soccer coach of a team that was not supposed to be very successful. On paper, we were even slated to be average at best. But my players found their way past average. They went beyond the naysayers, lost only one game, won our region, and then represented Columbus in the second round of the state tournament, going the furthest that a soccer team has ever gone in the school's history. I was perplexed, pleasantly surprised, and so were all the naysayers. How did you do that? So, being a coach, I asked my kids, how did you do the impossible? And one of my star players simply said, because you told us that we could. Talk about a proclamation, proclaiming the simple opportunity to reach excellence, making a statement that warrants and sometimes even mandates success, announcing the reality of hope and opportunity. These are just some of the keys to growth on a soccer field, success in a classroom, and opportunity in a city. Today's proclamation by the City Council does not simply highlight what goes on in room 212 of Jordan Vocational High School. It proclaims loudly and boldly the efforts of all of my Muskogee County colleagues. And I am honored to stand in representation of the hope and capability that we speak over our children every day. Today's proclamation also reiterates what envisioned leaders of our great city of Columbus stand for, and that is opportunity through education. I have had the privilege to live in many cities over my years of existence, and I have yet to see a group of city leaders so enthralled, so invested, and so engaged in the local educational system as I have seen while living here in Columbus. So I truly believe that success in the classroom hinges upon the paralleled vision of a city focused on opportunity and city leaders who vocalize the importance and power of education. You all, the City Council, are not unlike a soccer coach because you simply tell the community that we can. And instances like today proclaim the necessary partnership between policymakers and those of us in academics. So thank you so much for walking beside your teachers. Thank you for the megaphone that you have given us to proclaim to our students and to the community the resilience, the beauty, and the opportunity of Columbus, Georgia. Thank you.
Well, I certainly see why MEEF made the decision they did. You are exemplary in every regard. Thank you so very much for those wonderful and inspiring words. And we know our children's future's in safe hands with teachers like you. So thank you for what you do. We'd like to shake your hand, recognize you,
Sure.
and provide you with a copy of the proclamation,
Okay.
or the actual proclamation. Well, it's moments like that that make you proud to be in Columbus, Georgia, I tell you what. And Cheryl was right with the fact that there's so many people that care about this community, and that's what makes it great. So thank you. And in that same regard, I want to recognize Brian Anderson, our new CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. We welcome you to Columbus and welcome you to this City Council meeting. Is this your first? All right. Well, you're going to be well christened today because we've got a lot of business going on. But thank you for being here. We want to continue on with the mayor's agenda. I have one add-on that we decided to brief council on. We have had, as you all know, there's litigation pending against the city of certain elected officers, and we've had numerous statements made publicly, some here on public agenda, in the editorials of the paper and so forth, that make some particular statements. And frankly, we're concerned, the old adage, if you say something that's inaccurate 3 times, everybody believes it's true. And these statements go to the validity and credibility of the city government, and so we really feel like we need to address just a few things, and Sarah's going to help us real quick so that certainly no one gets the impression that the city is complacent in certain allegations regarding how we conduct business and the propriety of how we conduct business. First of all, Sarah, if you'd put the first one up. One of the major allegations that have been made here at the podium publicly is that the administration has violated what the litigants are calling Section 8105 of the city charter, and that the mayor is obligated to take budget requests and adopt them in whole into the budget with no modification, incorporation, and that council then is obligated to provide those funds as demanded by the elected official. And so it basically, in its essence, is saying that there's no such thing as executive budget proposal. And we just wanted to show that in Georgia law, and this is 36-814, Section C, actually provides specifically that any local jurisdiction can utilize an executive budget, and that the chief executive of that governmental unit can exercise what they call the initial budgetary policy-making function, while another individual, which is our city manager, is designated as provided in this code section as the budget officer and exercises the administrative functions of the budgetary preparation and control. Now, that's what Georgia law provided, and when our charter was enacted, Columbus, Muskogee County, the consolidated government, decided to adopt that initial executive budgetary policy-making process. And so if you'll go to number 2, Sarah, in Section 4201, it expressly provided, subsection 10, that the mayor would submit to council a recommended annual operating capital budget and capital improvement program as one of the enumerated powers of the executive of the jurisdiction. And if you go to number 3, the charter then provided in Section 4307 that the city manager and his enumerated duties would prepare and submit to the mayor the annual operating and capital budget and capital improvement program. And then it goes on to 4 and 5 and 6 actually show that the city manager has other oversight responsibilities related to the financial condition of the city and the obligation to report to this legislative body about those conditions. If you would go to number 4, document number 4. Then there's an entire section in our charter, an entire section that's entitled Revenue and Financial Administration. And Section 7401 actually sets out in great detail, it goes on for a couple of pages, what our initial executive budgetary policy-making function will be and precisely how it will be carried out. And if you look at section number 2 of this initial executive budgetary policy-making process, it states that a proposed annual operating capital budget for the ensuing financial year shall be prepared by the city manager to be submitted by the mayor to the council on or before a date fixed by ordinance, but not less than 60 days prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. And then it states that such budget shall be accompanied by a budget message from the mayor containing explanations of general fiscal policies, explanations of major changes recommended for the next fiscal year, a general summary of the budgets, and other information deemed appropriate. And so this is, of course, classic proposed policy-making function and is precisely the type of executive initial budgetary policymaking function that the governor of the state of Georgia has and the president of the United States has. It's a very common thing in our representative democracy to have executive policymaking budgetary process that's proposed to the legislative body. Of course, Section 3 then goes on to talk in detail about how to set out the annual operating capital budgets. But number 4 is probably most important because it's what the litigants will not respond to and directly contradicts their assertion that Section 8105 somehow mandates and changes the rest of this budgetary process. It states that each of the above sections of the annual operating budget shall contain, with respect to each of the operating funds of the consolidated government to which they are applicable, and then it lists A through E of what the mayor and the city manager are required to do by our budget. And of course, it says we must make a reasonable estimate of cash revenues in subsection B. And subsection C is what's critically important, that the mayor shall propose expenditures detailed by each department, board, commission, office, agency, and activity in accordance with the established classification of accounts. In Georgia law, the word office is defined as elected office. So if you are elected, whatever position that is, then you are known as an office, not as a department. And so our initial executive budgetary policy-making process, which is allowed by Georgia law and we chose to adopt, specifically provides that the mayor shall propose line item budget expenditures for each elected office. And then, of course, it goes on to talk about work programs and performance data and justification, and we do a line item resource analysis that we provide to council, and we do that for each office. It says for each department, board, commission, office, or agency. And also any other information, graphs and charts and digested information that we may think that council might find useful. And that material is voluminous. You see our accounting people come in with hand trucks, the boxes of documents. The documents are so great, we actually provide council with a jump drive so that they can have access to it. Number 5 of that provision, which goes on to the next page, and again, this is all in the initial executive budgetary policy-making process of our city government, that in no event shall the total proposed expenditures from any fund exceed the total anticipated revenues plus the surplus or fund balance we have. So unlike the federal government, we can't run a deficit. We have to balance every year. So it could not be, and Georgia law is well established, that no elected official can demand what they want for fear, of course, that you may overrun what your revenues are expected to be. And that's the responsibility of this great legislative body, is to weigh those competing needs and mandates given the revenues coming in. If you would go to number 5, which is still within the section of the revenue and financial administration as set out by our charter, which is our Constitution, it then lays out what the Columbus Council's duties are, and they're voluminous, but the council may amend the proposed operating budget because the mayor, of course, nor the city manager has any legislative authority. That's the exclusive and original jurisdiction of this elected body of 10 council members. And so they take the mayor's budget as a proposal, and then they can amend it in any way they see fit, and they do. They do after weeks of hearings. If you go to number 6. And now the provision that has caused such consternation. This is Section 8105, and note that Section 8105 is not listed in the revenue and financial administration of the city. It's not even in that chapter of our charter. It's just it's general provisions, also a part of our charter, our Constitution. And it states that regarding the budgets of county officers and agencies, and it says all elected officers, such as the sheriff, the tax commissioner, the judge of probate court, the coroner, and other elected officers, and this is important, and all agencies, because there's agencies we fund that are not elected. DFACS and Department of Health are examples. And all agencies not under the direct control and jurisdiction of the council, such as the Board of Health and Board of Family Children Services, which receive appropriations from the council, shall, prior to the commencement of each financial year, prepare and submit to the city manager annual operating and capital budget requests for the ensuing fiscal year. And what's important about this sentence is without this sentence, no elected officer and no agency which we fund would have to participate in the initial budgetary policymaking process of the executive of the jurisdiction. They would just show up at city council. They would not have to participate in the recommended or proposed budget. But this sentence requires that they submit and participate in that executive budgetary policymaking process by submitting their budget request to council, to the city manager, excuse me. And what's important about this language is, Sarah, if you flip over to number 7 real quick. Georgia law provides what a budget is. A budget's a very specific thing. It has to identify what your revenues are and what your expected expenditures are. And as you can see, Georgia law mandates exactly what a budget is. So if you go back to number 6, please. And they're not mandated to submit a budget. They're mandated to submit budget requests. And the word request is not defined in Georgia law, so when you don't have a word like that that's defined, you look it up in Webster's dictionary. Judges are very resourceful that way. And the word request means to ask. So it's not a budget dictate, it's not a budget mandate, it's not a budget requirement, it's a budget request. It's an ask. It's an ask. And Sarah, if you go to number 8 real quick, and we're going to flip back to 6. So this is what a budget request looks like. It doesn't show you what the revenues are. It doesn't show you what the other mandates are. It doesn't show you how much it costs to pick up trash. It doesn't show you how much it costs to fund the fire department. It's just a request. This is a budget request form for overtime. So it couldn't be substituted as a budget. It's not a budget, it's a budget request. So our charter sets out that these elected officers and agencies must submit, they must ask for what they need and what they feel they need to execute their mission. Again, what is important is in this sentence is that if it applies to the elected official, it applies to the agency. So if it were true that an elected official could mandate or dictate what their budget was, so could the Department of Family and Children's Services, so could the Health Department. Just say, hey, look, the state of Georgia cut us back, we need $12 million. You have to give it to us. If that sentence was to be read as the litigants contend, we would have to give to the Department of Health and the Department of Children and Family Services exactly what they asked for. And so that's to be noted. The next sentence, such budget requests, ask, shall be incorporated into the overall consolidated government budget for submission by the mayor to council. Okay, the word incorporated, you have to go back to Webster's dictionary. And the litigants have said that the word incorporate means that you have to accept it in toto. So if they ask for $8 million, that's what you got to do. But it says incorporate, and when you look up the word incorporate, it means to combine in, to fold in, to synthesize, to add to the mix, which of course makes perfect sense when you look at 7401 and all the things we have to do. We have to balance against revenue. We have to not exceed the surplus. We have to fund certain things by state mandate, by our own mandates, pension funds, things of that nature. And so these asks, these requests must be incorporated into the totality of the consideration, the totality of all the overall consolidated government budget for submission to mayor and council. And then council shall grant a hearing to any such officer or agency, including DFACS or the Department of Health, on such proposed budget. So these individuals, these departments are indeed, these offices are indeed heard. So if you'd flip to 9. There's been statements that never before in the history of Columbus, Georgia, has any mayor dared to not give them exactly what they ask for. So if you'd look at FY08, of course, the Honorable Mayor Jim Weatherington was in office. The budget requests, when totaled up by our finance department, with the personnel and the budgetary requirements of that office, In '08 was $1.87 million. Mayor Jim Weatherington proposed $1.14 million. And council appropriated that amount of money. In '09, it was $2.345 million that was requested. And Mayor Jim Weatherington proposed 1.180, and council adopted that recommendation. Then in '10, this office requested $2.609 million. Mayor Jim Weatherington provided and recommended $1.18 million. Council added back in some, as they do from time to time after deliberation, and the adopted budget was 1.2. FY11 would actually have been Mayor Jim Weatherington's budget as well. The office requested 1.966. Mayor Jim Weatherington recommended 1.618, and council adopted that amount. Then you go into what would be my first year in office. That office demanded $3.25 million. And my recommendation to council was 1.725, more than the prior year, more than Mayor Weatherington had done the prior year. And council reduced it a bit to 1.67. The next year, FY13, that office demanded requested $1.32 million. The mayor's recommended budget was 1.77, and council reduced it a bit, 1.73. In FY14, that office requested 1.9 million. It was recommended 1.58 million, and council adopted that amount. In FY15, this particular office chose not to submit a budget request, which, by the way, is required under 8105. As you remember, each elected office and agency shall submit a budget request. They chose to submit nothing, which violated the charter. And it was recommended 1.592, and council approved a little bit less. And of course, we're in the middle of FY16, but you can see those numbers there. We have these numbers for each of the offices that are engaged in litigation, and the pattern is exactly the same. Exactly the same. So it is not true to say, it's just not accurate to say that no mayor has ever proposed less than was requested. Again, that is combined and incorporated those requests into the overall consideration of the budget. And then finally, one last statement. Oh, okay. Yes. If you would go back to, I believe FY10, Pam, would have been the first OLOS year. What would be the first OLOS year where we appropriated OLOS money? FY10. Can you go up to that, Sarah? FY10? Just with your, lift the paper up so people can see it clearly. Okay, that was the first year we would have appropriated OLOS monies. And so it was 2.6 was requested. The Mayor Weatherington recommended 1.18, and council adopted 1.26. Okay. And we have these available for anybody. The one last one I wanted to put, number 10, because it's also been stated that the city is running up these costs defending themselves in this litigation. Well, I submit that once somebody files litigation, you have to defend yourself, unless you're going to just say that people get what they request, and that's the end of it, which is not the law, and we cannot concede that. So we have to defend ourselves against these allegations, and that's what's caused the costs, of course. Go to number 10, if you would. It was recently reported, this claim, the claim of some violation of 8105, was actually made the subject of a particular action called a mandamus action, which means to order the hand, to require somebody to do something. And the legal action was stated, was by the marshal and the clerk of municipal court, stated that the mayor had violated section 8105 and requested that the court require that I submit their budget request, that form of $20,000 you saw, that I require that I just put that in the budget in whole, and not what section 7401 required me to do. And so we spent a couple of weeks responding to document requests and lawyers looking over documents and making sure we had responded to sworn interrogatories and sworn requests for admissions. And we propounded our own so we could know what witnesses are you going to have. And this hearing was supposed to take place on Wednesday and Thursday of last week, June 3rd and 4th. Depositions were demanded on very short notice. I had to cancel my schedule. The city manager canceled all meetings. The finance director canceled all meetings. We stood ready for depositions. We canceled our schedules for the 3rd and the 4th. Counselors were brought in over after hours, and at other times they were available to meet with our lawyers to be prepped for this trial, for this hearing. All of that cost the taxpayers money. And then at 4:45 p.m. on Friday, before the hearing was to begin the next week, we received an email copied to the judge, and this is in the record in the case. It's been filed. And this is from the counsel for that particular litigation. And it says something remarkable. It says, after communicating at length with my clients, they have decided to withdraw the motion for mandamus relief without prejudice. That means they're going to drop the claim that the mayor violated the law, that the city manager violated the law, the finance director violated the law. We're dropping that claim. And they say, we began this battle, the litigation, because defendants would not take the jobs these officials do seriously. And it goes on then to say, if you move down to the next paragraph of the red marking, nonetheless, given the amount of time council spent considering the budget rather than rubber stamping the mayor's submission, which we still maintain did not comply with Section 8105 of the Columbus Charter, for FY15, FY16. We believe we accomplished our mission to get the council to have a conversation about the operation of the city and the reasonable funding of these offices. Okay, one thing that's important is that, just as a general principle, you can't file a lawsuit to harass your ex-wife. You can't file a lawsuit to harass your neighbor. You can't file a lawsuit to get a vendor to lower his bid. You file a lawsuit when there is a legal dispute that cannot be remedied, when there is a legal dispute. And so what has been stated here is that the lawsuit was filed to get council's attention to have more favorable legislative consideration of their budget requests. And so that indeed is remarkable as we look at the $400,000 we have spent now defending 4 litigants, 3 lawsuits, preparing for trials that are canceled at the last minute. So in any event, that is an overview. These documents, of course, are public record, and we'll provide them to anybody that wishes to see them. But, you know, the recipient for the teacher said, Teacher of the Year award said that we, like the teachers, inspire the community to say we can do great things. And that's what we do. We come here to keep the process legitimate. You have faith in the validity of this government, that we can do great things as a community when we come together. And so when there are statements made that any elected official is violating the law, we need to take that very seriously. And I appreciate your attention as we walked through that particular statement, because although we have not done that previously, the time, I think, was necessary because it had been stated so many times without public retort, and we can't allow you as citizens to think that we're violating the law. So I appreciate your patience. We'll move on to the next item, which is a referral. Councilor Woodson contacted me this morning. She's actually at a family gathering that was changed at the last minute that she just absolutely had to be at, and we understand and wish her well in her travels. She did say that, you know, we would meet later, so we'll meet later this week. I just wanted to run through. These are, Councilor Woodson had asked that we allow council, that we report to council regularly about expenditures by elected officials that are transfers of line items that may be outside the mission, because it is a lot for council to consider all of that information during the budget session, because there's just a lot, as I said, a thumb drive to consider. And so we provided exemplars here of expenditures that were transferred from salaries, leaving positions vacant and transferring those monies for a lawnmower. The marshal's office bought a lawnmower to mow the lawn up at the gun range that they have up north of town. For a firing range storage building, the lawnmower was $2,849. The firing range storage building was $4,436. And then the firing range surveillance system was $6,935. And those were transfers of salaries from vacant held positions. And that was one of the reasons, that type of expenditure was one of the reasons we recommended a decrease in funding, because the funds are being transferred for things outside the mission of the office. And council can consider that. However, council, once the money is appropriated, council can't tell an elected official how to spend it. So like the antique popcorn machine that was bought from operating funds, that's something that council can't stop once the money's been appropriated. That's within the judgment of the elected official. So those items are here as well with the invoices. And then there was also a request related to travel, because there were representations that travel was only $1,700 of a line item. And that may be the line item, but elected official can transfer monies from other line items. And so in 2013, for instance, in the marshal's office, monies were transferred so that the total travel was $32,789. And those were transferred very largely from salaries, holding positions vacant. In FY14, it was $24,739. And then to date, in FY15, of course, the invoices are coming in. It's $7,384 so far, but we haven't completed the year, and a lot of times those invoices lag. So that's information for council's consideration, and then we'll go on to the next item, which is a transition on. Oh, Councilor Davis.
Mayor, I did not know that you were going to address this early, although I've been doing a little work on my own, and I will tell you this straightforward. This is just not right. It's not right, and a lot of this is new information and in good conscience and out of the concern for taxpayers' dollars, whom we're all stewards. I did plan to address that today at the appropriate time.
Yeah, we have it on the city attorney's agenda.
Well, and I will, but, I want to go back to some of the comments you made earlier and just, if I might add to what you stated, and just looking at an overall observation of what we just saw, and on behalf of the citizens and a concern of the citizens, no city should ever be subject to the abuse of power. And to have a city handcuffed or shackled or burdened from the standpoint of those allocating an open checkbook would simply bankrupt the city. And everybody knows that we're in tough times. Everybody sees the transparency that's online. The numbers are there. The numbers are there. You can see it yourself. You can see where the revenues, where they're coming in. You can see where the expenditures are going out. And for department heads or elected officials to be in a position where they're making, in my opinion, irrational spending decisions, it's just wrong. It's not right. And there has to be, at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to give a definition of this, because you just can't be subject. A city, this body, the administration, future leadership, future bodies that will be governing this city cannot be put in a position where this kind of decision-making is going to happen every year. It's very abusive, and it's going to cost this city a lot of money, and it's got to stop. And, we need to have a decision on these matters and what's going on. It's very important. And I think the citizens want this. They want a decision made, and they want to see some finality of what's going on. So I do plan to address this from a standpoint. I did not know this when we went through questioning department heads and elected officials. There's new stuff that has come up. What I hear in the community, what's being presented in the community and projected in the community does not match up. And the only way that you can manage a situation like this is to ask people to work within their means of the budget that's submitted. And so, Madam Mayor, I thank you for addressing some of these concerns, and I'm glad you brought this up, but I do want council to know at the right appropriate time I want to address some of these matters and talk about it, because they're, in my opinion, they're totally irrational. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, we will move on then to a request for transition audit of the Community Investment Division, and we're going to have our internal auditor, John Redmond, come forward. John, good morning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Recently, I received a request from Deputy City Manager Hodge, and it was endorsed by City Manager Hughley and Mayor Tomlinson, for a transition audit of the Community Reinvestment Department. We have actually had several changes of command in that agency over the past, I guess, 7 years plus that I've been here. I think back to Joe Riddle was here when I first came. It moved from Joe to an interim of Mark McCollum for a period of time. Then Amy Carbajal was hired and served in the capacity for over a year. And then after she left, Deputy City Manager David Arrington filled the void during the interim until Laura McCool came on just recently as head of the agency. So there's been I think it's a legitimate request, and today I would request your permission to authorize that transition audit.
Got a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Any opposed?
Okay. Thank you. Next, I'd like to present it's really a combination of a transition and an operational audit of the Information Technology Department. You may recall Charles Tate, the director, long-term director, retired last summer. And in the interim, City Manager Isaiah Hughley oversaw the department until December, when Dr. Forrest Tolley was hired and taking the reins of the department. So we need to do a little look-see at that. Let's see if I can get this going. Okay. First, let's talk a little bit about the services that the department performs. Obviously, we know they have computers, not only the big computers like mainframes, but also the personal computers and others, that portables that we use. They're responsible for the telephones and the cell phone services, the internet and intranet, systems and application software, web page for the city, online payment systems, access controls, and numerous other things. But those are some of the major items, and we want to look at it in light of the transition of the management. Okay. First, we've been operating in a mainframe environment, and we looked at the policies and procedures, and we did find that the operating manual or the policies and procedures regarding the operation of mainframe were satisfactory. We did look for some other significant documents regarding other areas of the department, and we did not find those in existence during our search, so we were not documented at the time, but since then, policies and procedure manuals have been developed and are continuing in development. Next, we looked for the strategic plan. We did not really find one to be in place at that particular point in time for the department. So a written strategic plan is being developed by Dr. Tolley and his support staff. And this takes us in really a kind of a new direction for the department. We're moving from a mainframe operating environment to one that's going to be a server-based environment. And I think Dr. Tolley has discussed that in his budget deliberations and some of his earlier discussions with the council. A lot of that also involves developing out a fiber optic network in the city to all of our city locations and operations. And the long-term benefit of this will be an opportunity to reduce cost of the IT operation. And I know in times that we're dealing with the budget considerations we've had, as you know, relatively flat general fund revenues now for about 9 years or so. And considering just in general inflation of the cost and things that have been done and new things we brought on board, new facilities, it's very difficult to continue to do more with less. So we have to look for opportunities to afford savings to the city's operations. Moving forward, let's look at some new and different skill sets that will be required from staff to meet the strategic plan goals, because as we move from a mainframe environment to a server-based, it requires different skill sets. And so there will be necessary for some people to be retrained as we move in that direction. There will also be a need to probably hire someone that's experienced and qualified to develop that network and implement the server-based system. This will be an ongoing operation, but the benefits that we could reap from it are rather significant in relation to the cost. The two major costs that we'd have involved would be, one, building the fiber network, and of course the servers are fairly minor compared to mainframe equipment, but you've got to have a technician that can drive this process and develop it out, and it's an ongoing thing. So you don't want to hire consultants. Dr. Tolley shared with me just this morning that he had to have some consultants in of this nature last week or earlier this week, I guess last week, to work on the installation of some of the things that they're now doing moving forward to bring up the IES world system. And, you know, he had 4 technicians that were in here approximately 20 hours last week, and it cost almost $50,000. So that's penny wise and pound foolish to spend money like that on consultants when you can hire one, you know, for some $50,000, $65,000, $70,000 a year, including benefits, and get them in here. And we don't have to have this person going forward. So that's going to be something that has to be considered and looked at. Otherwise, we're going to spend an awful lot of money on consultants over the next few years. Next area we looked at, we did a payroll audit as we normally do with transition audit. We did find that all paid employees were classified and actively at work. And we certainly checked their IDs and everything to make sure they were who they said they were. We also looked at the pay rates and verified that they were being paid at the proper rate, so there were no findings in that particular area. System vulnerability. You may recall several months ago we had an executive session where you were briefed on some of the findings of a consultant that we brought in for a few days to evaluate our access controls. And frankly, the results were frightening. In fact, of the 17 areas that were looked at, we failed in 16. The only reason we passed the other one was because we had a strategic plan underway that included the development and strengthening of the controls. So some intermediate steps have already been taken to strengthen passwords, make them a bit longer and more complex. And also we're moving toward an encrypted password system and a limitation on the number of people even in the IT department that have access to all the passwords. In the past, these things were actually out there in plain English and quite available for anyone that had access to those systems. Future steps, we're going to need to do some penetration testing, both internal and external. This is something that Forrest is going to need to probably use a consultant for about a week to do that as well. We need to find out just how vulnerable they are as we move forward and how easy it is to penetrate. Going forward after that, we would recommend that probably be included as an addendum to the annual audit that's performed by our external CPAs that audit the system. They have that equipment and most of them have that capability. So that'll be an opportunity. Looking further at a few other things, I want to touch on software licensing. The good news is that we were compliant with, or relatively compliant with, most of our software that we had licensed by the city. As you know, we had one area that we did not have full compliance, and that was the Microsoft contract, which actually had just been kind of dropped a few years back and not renewed. We continued to use the software improperly, so Dr. Tolley had a good reputation with Microsoft, and he was able to work with them and negotiate a new contract that would remedy those deficiencies. And in the process, they also will be upgrading all of our Microsoft applications to the current version for all city users, which is important because we had users that were on 4 or 5 different versions. And it's very difficult for our training department to effectively train our employees and executives in the use of the software when whichever version they're teaching, the chances are 2/3 of the people in the room are not on the version that they are teaching. So we need to get everyone on kind of the same sheet of music there. And this will help us. It will also improve our productivity in the process. Contracts, we found that contracts did not follow the proper city review and approval process. Our normal process when contracts are being entered into or up for renewal is that they are routed around to all the affected parties. They're reviewed from the executive level at the mayor and the city manager. The city attorney's office normally reviews them as to form, and generally the finance officer as well as the department that the software would work with, in this case information technology, they review it to make sure that the provisions in the contract that need to be the services or the equipment or whatever they're contracting for, and likewise they look at it to make sure that the terms are not too onerous, because if you just take a contract that's handed to you by a major corporation where they're selling you something and you don't look it over and review it and demand some changes, it's going to be written in their favor. They hire very, very good and expensive attorneys to make sure that they're well protected. So we found some of those to be the case. And what had actually been happening for a number of years was, instead of the contracts from IT coming through the council for review and approval, in most cases, what we found is that the monthly payments were included on the city manager's purchase agenda, and you approved the payments properly, but you didn't actually ever see the contracts, and they weren't reviewed as they should have been. But that process, we're pleased to report today, has been changed, and we're now writing them in the proper fashion and with the right reviews. There were also some instances where, since the contracts never came to you, likewise, they weren't necessarily signed by the officials that are authorized to sign contracts. The mayor, by the charter, is granted that as the chief executive officer, and the city manager, as the chief administrative officer, is granted that privilege when the council approves and authorizes that to be done. So we want to make sure that we're continuing in that vein as well and keeping things in the proper notes. The next area we're going to talk about is going to be the wireless phones. One, we found that there was insufficient compliance and control of cell phones or wireless phones. The current usage, we have approximately 600 of these phones that are currently issued, and the monthly bill is in excess of $22,000. Certainly these phones are a piece of technology. Probably each of you have one in your pocket or right on your desk at the moment, but and we certainly don't intend to suggest that we don't have those or provide those to our employees, because they do improve productivity. But we do need to make sure that we monitor them and that they're properly authorized and approved. As such, we're recommending, and Dr. Tolley has agreed to this, to do a physical inventory of all these phones over the next month or so. And they're also going to look at what their uses are and verify the need. And if we find any that are not being used, or we find any lines that are not active, we're going to have those turned off so that we will save some cost in that area as well. Looking at the fiber optic cable uses, I mentioned that earlier. We do currently have some leased cables that are provided to us by, I believe, AT&T. We've actually had 2 different networks. They reach out to many of our locations, but not to all. The fiber, the uses of them are primarily to get telephones out there to it, or that capability, internet or intranet, and television. For the locations that currently are not attached to the fiber, they're using individual contracts to provide those services out there, sometimes that are quite more expensive than what we could do pushing it out from a central thing over a citywide network. Looking at that, we found that there are city facilities that were not currently linked on the fiber network, and as I said, the city currently contracts for that fiber, as well as for the phones, the internet, and the cable service, and from providers such as AT&T, WOW, Charter Spectrum, Mediacom, et cetera. Just to give you an idea, the monthly cost is currently about $55,000 for phones, $3,000 for internet, and $1,000 for cable television. These leased fiber optic networks are expensive, and it's an ongoing cost because you're renting. It's kind of like renting a house or an apartment. You continue to pay rent for as long as you use it, and when you end the term, you walk away and you don't have anything left. It does eliminate some expenses of the internet and cable because we have some that would go away if we went to a dedicated city-owned network. The issue with that, there would be a one-time installation cost, but the long term, it will eliminate cost of leasing fiber optic networks and contracting with other service providers for internet and cable. Essentially, as Dr. Tolley explained in the department head meeting last month, he could do the same thing he did when he was at the school district, and he would have one subscription for the internet, and we would pick the channels. There's probably about 10 that we need to have that are educational, the government channel, and so forth. And he can push that out over that cable to all those locations. They did it in the school district. They were able to push it out to every school, to every classroom where it was needed, and I'm sure an educator like Ms. Thomas would certainly appreciate how many places that they would need it in a school district. If we can do it there, it can be done here as well. We believe it would also improve the quality of service because the internet service capabilities vary considerably that are out in those locations that are not on the network. Some of them on DSLs and other slower forms of uploading and downloading. And we believe that the savings that could result from that implementation would be conservatively, and Joan did this projection, and so it should be of a forensic nature that would stand in court. She believes the net savings would be about $700,000 annually, as these contracts would go away over the next several years and be replaced by a city-owned fiber network. And again, that's part of what would be engineered by your network technician that Dr. Tolley has requested. I think that's all I have today. Any questions or any comments?
Well, it doesn't look like there are, John. That just shows how thorough you are. Thank
Thank
you. And I guess that is, oh, we do have Counselor Davis.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Are you finished with your reports, Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
You're pretty much finished, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to, I know in line with some of the things that the mayor was talking about earlier, some of the comments made, just for clarification for the sake of the citizenry, you've already audited the Civic Center, correct?
Civic Center? Yes, sir. We've got one piece that's underway right now that we requested.
So you're continuing to audit?
And that one is continuing, but Joan's working on it. Should complete it before she...
And the landfill, we've already dealt with that matter years ago, but it continues to be monitored as well. Your office has audited the landfill, right?
We look at that from time to time as well.
And your office has also audited over the course of time that you've been there. How many audits you think you've done throughout the government?
Departmental audits, we've probably done about a dozen at this point, Councilor Davis. We generally try to do about two per year, and depends on the size of them. One like Parks and Recreation or Public Works or Police Department or Fire EMS, those take a lot longer than it does an administrative department or one of the smaller departments. But we've looked at those. We've done payroll audits in every department with the exception of the police and public services, and that's primarily due to the time consideration and the coordination of getting all those people in one place and on the same shift. We've done a lot of special studies over the years. You may recall we had some issues with legacy terrorists a few years back. We went in and looked at that and helped develop a resolution whereby the city could take that back and manage it, and using the housing authority. There's been a lot of special types of projects as well. And then there's some one-time payroll audits. We've done some of vendors. You may recall we did some with our towing and recovery service, and were able to recover some monies that had not been paid to the city but were owed. Got them on the right track, and after a couple of years, they have performed very well since then. So
and you've spent time with the police department, the fire department. You've done audits there.
Yes, sir.
And
I think the important thing about audits, Councilor Davis, is that an auditor is rarely going to be able to have worked in every type of operation that they're going to audit. I've audited educational programs, but I'm really not a teacher. I've been an adjunct instructor from time to time at universities. But you're not going to be a sworn police officer or a sworn sheriff deputy, but you can still audit what goes on in those operations if you need to be.
And over the years, you've had, how many years your career's been? How many years now?
About 42, 43.
And you work for how many cities, companies, and
I
cities
work
as
for
well?
at least probably a half a dozen companies and 4 governmental agencies. One
So I think it'd be
state quasi-agency and 3 city or city-county governments.
I think it would be fair to say you have extensive background knowledge in those areas.
I would say so.
And
And some of those companies were fairly large where I did internal audits. Blue Cross Blue Shield is quite large. It's over $2 billion annual in revenues. I also did at W.C. Bradley early in my career. They were at the time over $1 billion in revenues.
And it's not just finances, it's efficiencies and performance and
Well,
all those.
yes, sir.
All those areas, right?
In fact, as I shared with the interviewing committee, the several counselors and the mayor at that time was Weatherington that I met with when I came in for my interview, we talked about the types of audits that are performed and what we would do. And really, as I said then, and I still stand by that, you get a lot more benefit out of doing operational audits than you do financial audits. We have an excellent audit firm that comes in and reviews our finances. Do they look at every transaction? Certainly not. Neither could I, for that matter. And they have 10 people on the audit that come over here. Pam, I think that's about correct. And they do a good job with that. There's not a lot to be found looking at that.
You're
You've
referring
got
to
to
the
dig into
external
the
audit, right?
operations. You got to look at the processes. You got to look at the controls that are in place to make sure, and remember, controls are just something that are to make sure that what the management wants to be done happens if the manager's not there supervising it constantly. Because we've got some department heads that manage extremely large operations like Ms. Beegler, the police chief, the sheriff, the fire EMS chief. Those people can't possibly be out there supervising hundreds of employees personally ongoing. So what they have to have is policies and procedures with controls built in that causes what they want to do to happen. And that's a prime example of what happened really in years past at the landfill, is that those controls were kind of negated during the period when there was not an auditor. And by the time it was caught, there was a lot of severe financial damage done to the city, several $1 million.
Well, there's a big difference in an internal
Yes, sir.
audit and an external audit.
There's a big difference. You look at different things. Remember, the external auditors that do the financial audits, they're primarily providing assurance to the public and to any lenders that we might have that our finances are as represented and prepared by the internal staff. And really, those financial statements are not of the auditor. They are of the staff and the finance director and the accounting manager. Those are the people that prepare those, and it's really their statements. The auditors just look at them and review and take the necessary steps to ensure that they're accurately stated and in compliance with the governmental accounting regulations.
Well, would you agree that whether it's dealing with efficiencies, dealing with performance, dealing with financial matters, whether it's waste, abuse, or fraud, it's a standard common practice
Sure.
in the business world?
And we've been fairly successful in unearthing some and remedying it and getting it fixed here. I mean, you may remember in the early years that I was here, we had several things that were unpleasant to deal with, but we've worked through them, and in every case, we have moved from something less to something far greater. Look at the accolades that our Parks and Recreation Department has earned over the last few years. And they literally rebuilt that almost out of the ashes because there was so much damage done to that department as we cleaned it up and ferreted through it, and the police did. But today we have one that we can be proud of. They have a stellar reputation in the state and the nation. And that's the goal of it. It's not to catch people doing things wrong. We can catch people. Everybody makes mistakes. The difference between a mistake and fraud is intent, really. It's one word.
Well, Mr. Redmond, we appreciate you. Thank you for the presentation today, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and appreciate, John, everything that you and Joan do. And next, we have the minutes of the May 26th meeting of the Columbus City Council for your review. We have a motion to approve them and a second. Any changes, corrections, errors? Hearing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? All right. And with that, we'll turn it over to the city attorney for his agenda. Mr. Fay.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We've got a lot to cover. Before we get to the FY16 budget items, we've got 2 zoning matters that are advertised for public hearing. The first one up is property north of J.R. Allen Parkway, west of Blackman Road and east of Schaumburg. This is going from a residential estate to single-family 3 and a residential office. Mr. Mize is here. For the applicant, proposed use is single-family residential and office. It's recommended for approval. There are certain conditions in the ordinance that apply to property, I believe, bordering on Turtle Creek. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Mize is here if there are any questions.
Doesn't appear to be at this time, no.
All right. Anybody in the audience want to be heard for or against? All right, we do have a hand, so. Mr. Mize, are you in favor or opposed?
I just have a statement.
All right. Mr. Mize, you want to make a brief statement about what the rezoning concerns?
Clifton, if I could just have a minute to ask him what his questions are, I may can resolve that without adding to y'all's already lengthy agenda.
Could we have the gentleman make a statement first? Is that proper procedure, Mr.
Well, I'll
City
just go
Attorney?
ahead and
Okay.
I don't want to go through the entire presentation if we can resolve it without having to do that. The staff report does present some conditions. We've worked hard with the residents out there to come to a consensus on conditions. The conditions that were passed and attached at the PAC meeting were the correct conditions. The one in the staff report needs a little bit of tweaking. And I have copies of the ones that we agreed to with the residents. I'd like to give these to Clifton for if we're fortunate enough to, to have the rezoning approved, that they would be incorporated into the amended ordinance. So if I could give these to Clifton.
All right, sir.
Again, not knowing what his comments are going to be, and I'm happy for him to come up and do whatever, but I don't want to get out of order or do anything that would be improper.
That's fine. I think it's proper for the gentleman to make a statement, Mr. City Attorney, and then Mr. Mize can respond.
That's fine, and we will also need a motion to get these new tweaked conditions put into the ordinance as an amendment, so.
Okay.
But we can have the questions first.
Yeah, why don't we have the gentleman come forward? Sir, if you would just come forward to make your statement. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Councilor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it might be good for you to go over the conditions first and let us hear that, and then that may help this gentleman as well. But I know Mr. Mize has met several times with the neighbors. I've heard from some neighbors, and I think everything's been resolved and worked out. But I would like to hear what the amendments are before
We've had numerous meetings with residents from Turtle Creek as well as Woodmark subdivision, and I've answered many calls on the phone and things like that. Maybe to get an idea of the conditions and how they apply, and I really hate, again, to add to your time, I'm going to pass out these booklets, and if y'all will turn to the tab marked Site Plan, that'll give you an idea about the conditions, because I think that's really all we've got to talk about.
She can do it for you, George.
Yeah.
She can have that.
Ms. Washington.
Thank you, Lindsay.
If y'all will turn to the tab marked Site Plan. Again, these 5 conditions have been worked through with numerous residents, and they apply. We're asking you to rezone two tracts of land. One is a 4-acre tract, which you can see in the northwest corner of this site plan. You can see the smaller lots. We're asking to rezone that from RE1 to SFR3, which is the exact same zoning classification as Turtle Creek is zoned. The point here is, Will White is the developer, and Will is with me today, but the point here is to add an additional and final section of Turtle Creek, and he's going to develop those 4 acres consistent with the other sections of Turtle Creek. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the 4 acres, but the other tract of land that we're trying to rezone is 19.03 acres, and those are the larger lots that you see on the site plan, okay? The conditions relate only to the 19.03 acre tract. The conditions are 5 conditions. The first 3 relate to the land that's designated on this site plan as lots 1, 2, and 3. This is the land that borders Turtle Creek lots that are currently fronting Pine Branch Circle and Turtle Creek Court. That is the distinction in the conditions that we thought were important. It only affects those 3 lots because once the 4 acres is incorporated into the Turtle Creek, then that becomes Turtle Creek, and those conditions would then affect Lot 4. And we don't want that to happen, and that's not the intent of the conditions and the agreements we had with the residents. But anyway, with respect, the first 3 conditions relate solely to those tracts of land that are designated on the site plan as 1, 2, and 3. We've agreed to limit the building height to 1 story. There'd be 1 building per lot and a maximum of 4 lots in that tract of land. That relates just to the lots 1, 2, and 3 there. With respect to the entire 19 acres, we've agreed to no motel and no hotel. With respect to the full 19 acres, we've agreed to no traditional garden-style apartments. These are apartments that are similar to what Mr. Will develops now, the Greystone communities. We've agreed not to place your garden-style apartments on any portion of the 19 acres. But to be clear, that wouldn't prevent a development where you have multiple residents that pay rent, such as an assisted living facility. What we're trying to do here is we just agreed not to do apartments, traditional apartments. Any questions about any of those conditions?
No, doesn't appear to be, no.
Okay.
Gary?
All right.
All right, let's hear from the gentleman.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Give him your name and address, please, sir.
Good morning. My name's David Edenfield, and I live at 248 Pine Branch Circle. I live there with my wife and 2 daughters. So I'm lot 21 on the site map there. So I would be backing up to the rezoning, the office development. So just to be clear, I'm not here representing the Turtle Creek Homeowners Association, but would like to provide just a little background information of our reaction to the rezoning. We met several times as a homeowners association, as a neighborhood, about the proposal, and we actually met with Mr. Mize and Mr. White to discuss, the conditions in the rezoning. We, obviously do not want this in our backyards, but understand the reality that it, more than likely will be rezoned. So we're just trying to, we're trying to reduce the impact of our neighborhood by supporting the conditions submitted with the rezoning. So there's no doubt that Mr. White will build a quality, professional, nice-looking development. He's proven this many times throughout the city. My question has never been about the quality of the development. My concern has always been about the buffer, the effect it will have on my family's backyard activities, and what it will look like from my backyard. Just because it's going to be a nice development doesn't mean that I want to see a parking lot in my backyard. My understanding of the 3 buffer options includes an option for a 10-foot buffer with a fence. I would hate to imagine our homes being separated from a parking lot and an office building with 10 feet and a fence. I would like for you to consider eliminating this option from the possible 3 buffers. I believe the other 2 options for a buffer are 20-foot natural buffer and then a 20-foot planted buffer, is it? And a 30-foot natural buffer.
Okay. All right, we
Thank
have Counselor Thomas.
I would like for someone to speak to.
Okay.
If someone can speak to that issue. I did want to make a motion, though, whenever we get.
Okay, all right.
The
I'm going
questions
to
to-
turn yours off. If you want to put it back on, I'll get you in queue. And Mr. Mize, would you like to respond to that? Then I have other
I would, and I've
counsel.
just talked to Will. We have no intention of putting a fence back there. As I understand a type C buffer, you've got three options. You've got a 10-foot buffer with an opaque fencing, 6 to 8 feet, something like that. Number two, you've got a 20-foot buffer with certain plantings. And number three, it's a 30-foot natural buffer, okay? Let me just tell you what Will plans to do. If you look on the site plan, you see the 50-foot stream buffer. Well, that's about twice as big as what the state requires, is my understanding. And Will has already reached out to the engineering department, and this is what we agreed with the residents to do. He's reached out to your engineering department, and he's going to request a reduction in the stream buffer from 50 feet down to 25 feet. The sole purpose of that request is to be able to shift that development a bit to the south, thereby increasing the width of the buffer between the development and the Turtle Creek lots. With David here, Lot 21 will benefit directly from that shift if we can get approval from the engineering department to do that. The intent now is not to put a 10-foot buffer with an opaque fencing. We're either going to choose a 20-foot buffer with plantings, or we're going to go with the natural buffer. And the hope and our desire is to shift everything a bit to the south and increase the size of that buffer. The only one that may not benefit from that is the ones that are just north of Lot 1 is shown on that site plan, just because there's no stream there. So there's no way to really shift it to the south. But we have already got that in the works. Will has already reached out to the engineering department, and that's hopefully underway. So that'll hopefully address Mr. Edenfield's concern.
Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. George, in the past, we've used a berm with some plantings on it to try to shield the neighbors. I was wondering if that would work here, if that would be something you could consider. Just along the border of the homes in Turtle Creek. If you
You're
could
talking about inside the buffer?
Yeah, if you could.
Well, if you have a 30-foot undisturbed natural buffer, you'd have to go beyond that. You couldn't do it inside that natural
So
buffer.
is this distance 30 feet? Abutting Lot 21, I think is what he described as his property. Is it 30 foot back there?
There's more than 30 feet, Gary, right now. But depending on how it's developed, we will certainly stay within. It will not be less than what obviously the buffer ordinance requires. But the intent is to try and increase that buffer. Now, I don't know that you want us to, within the 30-foot natural buffer, go in and place a berm, because then you're destroying the natural buffer.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I guess what triggered it was I was looking at the diagram of the building and then the parking lot behind it, and as cars pull in and park behind it, if there are any headlights, depending on the time of day, then that may get into him. But if it's a dense buffer, then that would hopefully alleviate that problem.
And the parking lot may not be configured the way Moon Meats has it drawn on here. But keep in mind, too, if we just develop this exactly the way Turtle Creek is developed, SFR3, there would be no buffering requirements.
Right.
Instead of putting one building per lot and a maximum of 4 buildings on this border, we could go in and put 3, 4, 5, 6 houses on each one of those lots without any buffering. This by far is the best way to use this property for these residents, is because it's required, buffering is required. If we went in and put in an SFR3 zoning, we could go in with much more dense development without buffering. So, from our perspective, and apparently pretty much all of the residents agreed with us that this is by far the best way to develop this property for them.
Okay, let me just try to address his question. I think if I understood it right, he was concerned about, of the 3 options, I think it was the 10-foot, and what you're saying is you have no intentions of utilizing that.
We'll eliminate the 10-foot opaque fencing option,
Okay,
yes.
and I think that would resolve everything.
Right. That's what I heard, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Do
All
we need to
right.
make that a condition? I mean,
You can go ahead and make a motion to eliminate the 10-foot buffer option, if you'd like to. That'll
Okay.
be clear in the record.
I so move.
Got a motion and second. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Councilor Davis.
Somewhat, my experience with Mr. White, our experience with Mr. White has always been that he's been reasonable and willing to work with with folks in the neighborhood in the general area, and I think he'll continue to do that if there's even requests along the way. I've seen his style and his approach, and he's always tried to do that. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't here, Mr. Mize, and I think you would agree. When I look at this development, I'm somewhat reminded of Brookstone Center without a hotel and without apartments. Is that pretty, I mean, that's pretty much what I'm seeing.
Well, and
what
you
he's
know,
trying to
he
accomplish.
owns the terraces. That's a really nice development. He owns a building in River Park, and that may be the style he's looking at, maybe something like a River Park. We've not developed any elevations or anything like that, but you're right, Glenn, it's going to be upscale. It's going to be very
And it
well
can,
done.
you know, it seems like it can coexist, but I do know that you've got a good developer there that you can work with. I think everybody concurs with that, and like I said, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't continue to work with the residents in this case and minimize any kind of impact, or especially when it comes to green space and buffers and things like that. You got a good counsel working for you, too.
All right, we have Counselor yes, sir.
Could I say one more thing?
Yes.
My intent was never to question Mr. White's reputation around town. I mean, he's definitely been a good neighbor. He's worked with us, been willing to work with us as far as doing the conditions, and we appreciate that. So my concern was just a 10-foot, so thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Yeah, we have Counselor Thomas.
Mayor, I move the conditions to rezoning as presented this morning.
Okay, a motion and second on the amendment to add conditions. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Well, Counselor Davis?
I'm fine.
On something else? Okay. All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, and the conditions pass.
Okay, those conditions are dated June 9, 2015, and attached to the site plan, and the clerk has those, will be part of the record. All right. With that amendment, are there any other questions?
Yeah, we got Counselor Davis.
And Mr., I didn't see Mr. I'm sorry about that. I hope I didn't overspeak or overstate, but I didn't out there. I apologize.
Okay. All right, Counselor Henderson.
Yeah, just for clarification, Mr. City Attorney, there were some conditions substituted. How are they different from what's on our ECAP? Because it sounds to me, based on what Mr. White said, that they're identical.
Well, I don't know what your ECAP shows.
And no
These
offense, but that's why
are a
I'm
little
asking.
different. These are a little different. They specifically mentioned Pine Branch Circle and Turtle Creek Court. What you had in the
Why
draft
don't you read them?
did not.
I mean, we just voted on some conditions that we were given the cliff notes on, and I don't doubt that they're going to satisfy everything, but I just think they ought to be read into the record.
That's fine. We'll go ahead and
When
do
the
that.
when the first staff report came out to the PAC, I asked Kevin to correct that, and then when the second one came out, I emailed Kevin and said we need to, get it corrected, and Kevin said I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
The ones that Clifton has are the ones that we have maintained throughout the entire process once we got to PAC. And the reason being is we want to make sure that the new section of Turtle Creek that's going to be added will not be part of that, because south of there is Lot 4 on that site plan, and those conditions do not apply to that portion.
Yes, sir, and I
Okay,
get that.
That's why.
I get that completely. I think I'm just a little nervous that we voted on something that we haven't even heard read to us yet. So I think it might be a good idea to, well, I don't see it changing any votes, but I think we probably ought to get it read into the record.
There are only a couple of words that have been added, but let's read them into the record. Condition number 1, this is for the 19.03 acre tract only. Number 1, limit to single story. We will limit the height of the buildings to be located on the lots that border the Turtle Creek lots that front Pine Branch Circle and Turtle Creek Court to a single story. Number 2, limit to 1 building per lot. We will limit the development to 1 building per lot for the lots that will border the Turtle Creek lots that front Pine Branch Circle and Turtle Creek Court. Number 3, no more than 4 lots. We will agree to limit the number of lots that border the Turtle Creek lots that front Pine Branch Circle and Turtle Creek Court to no more than 4 lots. Number 4, no hotel motel. We have agreed that no motel or hotel will be constructed on any part of the property. And 5, no apartments. We have agreed that no traditional garden-style apartments will be constructed on any part of the property. However, to be clear, this would not exclude all developments that have multiple residential tenants that pay rent, such as an assisted living facility. That's what you have incorporated by amendment today.
Okay. Looks like there's no further questions.
Okay. Y'all want me to collect those booklets?
We will keep one for the clerk, and Ms. Washington will have a vote on that as amended next week.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes that zoning hearing. Next hearing we've got is property located at 7822 and 7838 Lloyd Road, going from single-family residential 1 to single-family 4 with a 45-foot lot width variance. Is the petitioner here this morning? Mr. Langfit present? All right. Is anybody here opposed or wants to comment on the zoning?
We have Counselor Davis.
Okay.
We don't have a representative here, right? Well, maybe you, Mr. Jones, maybe you can answer my questions. I think this is consistent with what is already there, I believe. I don't think it's out of the norm or any greater request for a variance.
Yeah, Councilor Davis, I wish the applicant was here to express his desires more directly than I can. But the idea really is to come in compliance so he can develop and maintain his lots out there so he can go on from on the daily business.
I believe it's a continuance. My question is continuance of what he's already started.
That's correct,
there.
absolutely. So it really is in line with everything else out there being developed now or has been developed over the years. So he's just trying to come to compliance.
And that variance is consistent,
yes,
again,
absolutely,
with what's already there. Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, any other questions? We will vote on that matter then next week at the council meeting at 9 a.m. All right, well, Mayor, we'll move into our FY16 budget items. The first ordinance up is the operating budget for FY16 and total amount of $265,724,993. It's up for any discussion and any proposed amendments.
All right. We have the city manager.
Madam Mayor and Council, it's really unusual for me to talk on first reading and advocate for something that's different than what has been brought forth in the budget. But I am going to do that today. I did call the budget chair yesterday to speak with him and share with him my concern that we did not get included in the proposed budget the network engineer for our information technology department. And so I've asked the IT director, Forrest Tolley, to make one last effort to encourage council and share with council, answer additional questions from council to see if we can get approved the network engineer position. And let me just say, in asking him to come forward, that I do applaud Councilor Thomas. I know this is a position that she had on the at the LEAP list, and she is concerned, as I am concerned, about increasing the number of employees we have on city payroll. But you know, we've got a lot of things going on in our information technology department and throughout the city in terms of trying to move from a mainframe system to a server, and I really want to express my appreciation to the internal auditor, John Redmond, who spoke briefly about information technology and the mainframe versus server system and the need for a network engineer, and he shared briefly what we spent just last week, for example, on consultants and coming in, and consultants are very expensive, and much of consultant costs can be eliminated with in-house staff, a network engineer person, with what we are attempting to do with IES World, with the Tax Assessor's Office, Tax Commissioner's Office, with the Records Management System, the RMS, with our public safety, with Advantage Plus, our financial system, and our HR, Human Resources Management System. And so I wanted him to come forward and just share once again why this network engineer position is important. As I talked to the budget chair yesterday, he says, well, you know, how do we offset that cost? I had a conversation with Deputy City Manager of Finance, Planning and Development, our former Finance Director, Pam Hodge, and wanted her to talk with our IT Director about the savings that we would net from having a network engineer on staff. And so with that said, I'm going to ask Director Tolley to come forward, and then he'll be prepared to answer any questions, as will our Deputy City Manager of Finance, about the savings and how that might help defray the cost of adding a network engineer. And Councilor Thomas, I promise you, I don't want to add not one additional employee. I think, as I remember, your question was, if we have 3,000 employees on the payroll and it's going to make it 3,001, you oppose it. And I certainly understand that, I get that, but this is critical, and we wanted to make one last attempt to sell this position. So with that, Director Tolley.
Madam Mayor, Mr. City Manager, Council, I come to you today to kind of explain again why I think it was my top priority for a network engineering position. First, I start with the picture that we really basically have people that can do each of these little groups, but I don't have anyone that can do the whole picture. So I don't have anyone that can go everything from internet to virtualization to the desktops to the IP phones to the wireless to the whole gamut. And that's really what your engineer would be able to do. On the screen here we have just several machines, but the city actually has thousands, hundreds of servers, thousands of devices. In staffing, we've gone over some of this before. The current staffing was designed around mainframe. We have growing emphasis, if you heard, on server and web-based systems. We have one person that supports the network, and that staff member has no formal training on the current technologies. So the training that they have is on what we have had, not what we have moving forward. Currently, we pay around $150 to over $700 an hour for network engineering services when we need the services, and the new position would save money over time. And what I kind of was troubling me is, like, I've heard council say, well, what do you exchange for the position? Last week, our RMS and IAS World, we spent, or we will be spending, around $50,000 for what a network engineer would do for that one project, but it saves the IT budget no money. What it saves is, or what it would save, is the RMS and the IAS World. And I kept seeing that when I get savings, I don't get the savings. When I save on the internet services, that really saves the fire and public safety. So I was kind of saying, oh, how am I going to get money out of my budget when really, you know, the $4,000 I save here and the $8,000 I save there, or even in the case of the fire stations, the $10,000 a month that you save, that doesn't come into my budget. That's the savings that actually the city enjoys. So I kind of understood why it's kind of hard to see sometimes the savings that IT can generate. I can't control really what hardware costs, but I can mitigate what my staff costs. And like I said, I was kind of concerned because the net savings comes to the city. It doesn't come directly to me. My IT services, although I do pay out of my budget, probably $250,000, $300,000 for a network engineer type person to come in. As many people that come in to do that service. I don't actually pay the money out of my budget to do like RMS. That comes out of the RMS project. But there's a $42,000 or $49,000 worth of services that we would have only needed to pay about $10,000 for if I had a position. And that kind of hit home with me on why I couldn't do what you asked, which is here's the money for this position, because it's really I'm spending other people's money, and which is really the city's money. You can see on my org chart, the one position I really need is the network engineer. I wanted to go through the current active projects, IAS World, which we talked about, RMS, the record management. This past week, we've obligated about $50,000 to a network engineering type people that do the Cisco, people who do the IBM blades and the storage. But that's not out of, quote, IT budget. That's actually out of RMS, IAS World. So I don't recoup the money for myself, but I recoup the money for the city in general. We also have e-ticket, our core switch replacement, our voice over IP upgrade, that's the phones. And you saw that with the phone savings that it's estimated that cost is in the almost $750,000 that we can mitigate a lot of those costs. And of course, that's over several years as contracts run out, but in each given year, you would be saving hundreds of thousands of dollars if we can get these different things upgraded. We also have the wide area network and the local area networks, and cloud computing, which is part of really disaster recovery. You heard in the audits that we have backups, that go to tape. But what we do not have is a disaster recovery solution which would allow the data center to be destroyed and operations to continue. And that's really what you need a network engineer and your cloud computing solutions to do. Some vendors provide it, most vendors do not. So that's one thing that we would actually lose without having a network engineer. You lose the ability to do disaster recovery. You don't lose the ability to do backups. We back up now. In other words, we take stuff and we copy it, we put it on tape, and we store it off-site. But then if something happens to our actual data center, there's nothing to actually copy it back to make it work. So we really need the network type person, the person that knows soup to nuts, to be able to actually mitigate our risk on disaster recovery, so that if we're down, we can actually get back up within a matter of days, not months, and we can actually move forward. Like I said, we do all of the things that we can without that position, but we really don't have that position at all, and it wasn't needed really before IAS World and RMS came into being. You could have used it, but you said needed. Now it's really needed. And as we move some other things, like our network security and controls, you can't really have network security and controls unless you have a network engineer that actually oversees the network controls. The Microsoft Office and Windows upgrades, the way we do things now is we actually go to every machine and we have to work each machine one at a time. With a network engineer, we can make these upgrades really remote, saves a lot of time, energy, and money. To put a data center stability, and you heard the auditor, 18 months, we would be in a position to show a vast improvement, but we want it stable. We want all our systems upgraded. One of the things that we have a plan for, and we have a cost for, just updating some of the switches on one of our storages is about $42,000. A network engineer would be able to do that in-house. We wouldn't need to hire that out at all. You can see that it easily, without a network engineering position, that your consulting fees and your SOWs for putting in any piece of equipment just goes up astronomically. And the other thing that I found over my experience is one thing that you cannot do is you can't outsource your brain. You can't actually have a vendor tell you what you need and tell you what you want and just sell you a product. You have to have someone on this side of the fence, on the city side, defending the city's interest to make sure that all the proposals go through and that someone, again, knows soups to nuts. Top critical needs in priority order, you've seen this before, network engineer. With the network engineer, the core switch and network infrastructure, which is in progress, becomes more efficient. We don't have to outsource those services. Our upgrading licensing, we passed that at the last meeting, and that's mainly our Microsoft equipment and licensing. You need a network type engineer for that. When we move into the integrated courts jail, public safety, which I'm sure we will at least get to the point of having the plan in place next year to move to that system, you need a network engineer because those systems have to negotiate the gamut from the jail to the courts to all the other places that the information needs to go. And then in the end, the integrated HR payroll system, even if it's cloud-based, and people say, well, what if you store it on the cloud? What if it's cloud-based? Well, you got to remember the network engineer has to make sure it's secure from the cloud into us and from us back out. Now, we have, like I said, a person that can do bits and pieces as a group, though we don't have anyone that can see the whole picture. And I just want to leave you with the fact that the position really is the first step in having someone that would really know everything from what's on your desk to what's in the cloud to what's in the data center and to how to make it all coordinate and work as efficient as possible. And in the meantime, it saves the city money. Now, what would it save me? It'll save me more than the salary over time, more than $100,000 a year, but it actually saves the city on every project IT does. Every time you pay for these disaster recovery services or every time you pay a vendor to come in to set up a switch or to redo your VoIP, which is the telephone systems, you're paying a much larger price. If you just interpolated over 12 months what it costs just for the RMS project, IAS World project, in the 1 week that we had to use that service, you would find that that's about $600,000 a year. And I don't have the whole yearly budget, but I do have about 6 months worth of budget, and that is in line with what we're spending for these services. Now, the first year you save, like I said, on the $40,000, the $49,000, we would have saved all but about $10,000 had we had our own network engineer. Everything's not that good, but you would always save at least half because you still need them to put in their stuff or at least advise on their stuff, but you don't need them here actually plugging in wires and setting switches and then spending all the time that they do. A lot of their work is actually asking us, what do we do? So then it takes up all of our time and their time, which we're paying them for their time, and then finding out what it is that we do. So I ask you again to please reconsider adding this engineering position. It's been my top priority since I came because I really believe that the knowledge base is really what takes you forward. I have plenty of knowledge on how to do, but I don't have the technical skill at every level, as no one does, to make it all happen. And this position actually would advise everything from my technicians to my supervisors, to my network manager, to my web team, to the internet, to our servers, our virtualization. That position, this person really does all that. So again, I just
we
ask
have
your
some questions.
reconsideration.
We've got in discussion, we have Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor, I want to make a motion that we authorize this position in the budget.
Okay.
The thing that really gets me is, elected officials can have their budget. They can go out and buy stuff that doesn't improve the operations of the department or go to meetings that doesn't improve the operations of the department. And here we have someone who needs a person You know, we have okayed a lot of money to be spent on software in the upcoming year. And to go out and purchase hardware and software and then not be able to operate it, I think we need to take a second look at it.
All right. That's a motion. I don't know if there's a second, but we do have, is there a second? Okay, there's a second, and we have discussion. Counselor Allen.
Could you go back to the organizational chart? Where would this person fit in? It's kind of
They're the hash line that says network engineer, and they actually fit under the networking manager.
Is that Kevin?
That would be Kevin.
Okay.
And Kevin's skill set is with the servers and the internet and the router. His experience is not with IP phones, desktops, the PCs, the routers, smartphones, laptops, that kind of group. That's not his skill set. His skill set is with the data center itself and the internet. So that's kind of, this position would be a bridge between the things that he does every day, which we still need to happen, all the way down to the person that actually works on your machine. In other words, how does it get from you to Kevin? And that's what we lack. We lack the person that has the overall actual working knowledge of making each of these items work. We have individually people that can do some of the jobs, but we don't have really anybody that can program the switches and routers to the degree necessary or modify our IP, Internet Protocol phones. We have to hire that out, although we have someone that can manage it once it's in place. So that's where that position fits, right there.
Is it, have you identified somebody in your department that could be trained to handle this?
This position, at least now, since it would take probably to get the different experiences, I don't think we have anybody in my department. I have some people that I'm sure over time, because you saw that my final chart, that once you have a mainframe that we don't need, that we would have 2 such positions. I think by then I would have someone in my department that would be capable and ready. But since this is one that you really want on the ground running, that already has experience with Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, already has experience with IBM, already has experience with VoIP, already has experience with all of these different things, I really don't think that we have that on staff.
Going back to the net savings, how much do you think in the first year you would have?
I would think that for the city, that we should be able to, and I'm calculating, probably $250,000, $300,000 minus this person's pay. So it would be $200,000 range actual savings across different areas. Most of the savings would be outside my area, where we would be helping the public safety and RMS type stuff.
How much in the second year?
The auditor has expressed that once the contracts are, we go through them, which is probably, I think, the longest one we have is about 3.5 years. So within the next 3.5 years, the auditor's estimated $700,000 a year.
Per year?
Per year.
Okay.
Of course, minus this position, so it would be 600 and some change, once we get rolled through all the contracts that we're currently committed to.
And what's the salary of this person?
With benefits is $57,678, and this is a pay grade 19.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Oh, they reclassed it to 21.
Okay. Pam, was there more information? I'm sorry, did you have some
It was
correction?
a pay grade 21.
Pay grade 21, okay. We have Counselor Henderson, Budget Chair.
Pam, stay there. What did that do to the salary savings? Because on the add delete list, it was classified as a G19 at the 57,678. Does moving it to a 21 escalate that salary expense?
Yes, that originally was put on as a G19 at 57, and I'll have to recalculate, but it'll probably add about 5,000 to the total.
So around 63,000.
Around 62.
All right, and I wanted to offer up a couple of different ideas. I don't know that we want to tie this motion to the one for adding the position, but and I appreciate the idea about it, anticipated savings, but I think I'm much more comfortable, especially since it's salary, and trying to make it balance. One thing, and I have not talked to the department heads, and I'm about to bring this up, and I apologize to them, but I know John has lost an assistant auditor. I don't think we can do without one. But I think to help balance it, for 50% of the annual savings, because it's going to take some time to find somebody. If we had a hire date targeted of January 1, we'd save 50% of that particular salary savings for this year. And I'm saying this out loud, Pam, because I'd like you to calculate it and let us know how close we are to balancing. And the other, it's not my authorship, but Councilor Davis had made a suggestion based on some of the other things we talked about this morning with regards to the expenditures that were made public to us about in the Marshal's Department, how they were funded from an unfilled but funded position. The recommendation when we dealt with the other two deputies was to transfer those into the police department so there'd be no weakening of public safety, and I think that's a good way to approach it. But I also want to propose that we eliminate that position that's been unfilled since October and been used to fund travel and lawnmowers, buildings to hold the lawnmower, and cameras to watch the building that hold the lawnmower. It appears to me it's clearly not an essential position if that's what's been used. So if we eliminate that position, just eliminate it, don't transfer it to the police department. I don't think it's going to weaken what the marshal's doing because he hadn't had that person there for almost a year. And add that to the half of the year savings from the auditor's office. I'd be interested to see how close that comes to balancing, Pam.
Okay.
And that's in the form of a motion, by the way.
Okay, that's a motion and a second, and we have other counselors in line. And just to speak to Counselor Henderson, remember, council adjusts the funding based on information related, as you stated, positions and use of funds. But what an elected official does with those positions, they can do after you set a budget. So we're always talking about the funding for that position, and you're exactly right.
And that's what I meant, was eliminate the amount equal to what it costs to fund that.
To fund it. And you said it right. I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so let's see. We've got others in line here. We have Counselor Davis.
Well, Dr. Tolley, I hear your plea, and I'm still working through this as well. I appreciate the counselor being willing to come up with suggestions. I think they're good. I think the whole problem here is somewhat that you were at the top of the line when it came to the add and delete list, and not knowing where it was all going to play out, it just, it backed us up right to that 60-day mark, which is a concern. I'm concerned now that of a cushion, which I think the finance director would probably agree with me, the city manager would probably agree with me about a cushion, and Councilor Henderson is essentially solving that matter of concern that I have there. I was going to ask the city manager if there were other ways to find supporting funding, or if it got to the point where it could be monitored, if the city manager was willing to make a decision that would allow for an adjustment or supporting funds to support this position if it came to a standpoint where it was needed from a budgetary days in the fund balance. I think that can be done, Mr. City Manager. Would you agree to that as well, on top of what Councilor Henderson is saying? And I'm not going to make that in form of a motion, but I feel like you would make that adjustment.
the answer, my response to that is yes, Councilor Davis. You know, I'm still hopeful that the digest will come better than what we've projected and included in the budget. But to respond to your question, yes, if you know, we would work it, and we would work it without having to go into the fund balance any further, and we'd do that administratively.
Well, I think, Madam Finance Director, do you feel comfortable working with that 60.375 and what it's with some additional support that Councilor Henderson's proposing?
Right, the budget.
With the city manager saying that he would also make adjustments?
Right, the revised budget at this point is with the fund balance at 60.25. The position that Councilor Henderson referred to was valued at $49,049. This position with benefits at a pay grade 21 is $66,636. So it represents about 75% of that position. So it could start October the 1st and be a wash to the budget with offsetting with that one position.
So it wouldn't have an effect on 0.37, right? It's 0.37, 60.37 right now on the days.
60.25 based off of the revisions that council made from the add-to-delete list. We're at 60.25.
Does that cushion make you, that 25%?
Absolutely.
Cushion make you nervous? Well, that's my concern.
Yeah.
I think that I'm feeling a lot more comfortable of you know, what I'm hearing both
And
in
again,
a proposal.
And again, if, you know, knowing that if you do what has been proposed, the position would not be fully allocated for the entire year, and we would pick up funding or hiring at the appropriate date that would keep us within the balance. And but we would work it that we wouldn't touch the fund balance for this particular position.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Let's see here. We've got other counselors in line, and let me just, Madam Clerk, so I keep myself straight, we had a motion. Did we have a second? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. All right, and then we have Counselor Thomas.
I have several questions. The $700,000 savings that Mr. Redmond spoke of was not from the IT budget, is that correct? It was over a number of budgets throughout the city, correct?
It's over a number of budgets, but probably about 600,000 of that is in the IT budget.
600,000 is in the IT budget?
Correct. But it wouldn't be saved this year. It would be saved once those contracts play out.
And which line item is that?
It's mostly AT&T telephone and WOW and Charter. So those would be in communication and those type of services.
Well, under the approved FY15 budget, under telephone, we've got $550,000, and under the proposed budget, we've got $700,000. So you're saying it's going to come out of there?
No, that would be where the savings ultimately comes. Again, the contracts with AT&T have to expire, and that's what the forensic auditor has alluded to. So that savings, we will be able to save a lot of that money, but only as those contracts expire.
And that is the line item 6621 telephone?
Yes, ma'am. We'll be able to save probably 2/3 of that.
2/3 of the 700,000?
Over time.
That's in your budget?
That's in my budget.
It is in the proposed budget?
Over time, but this year, unfortunately, we're in the contract still, so I won't be able to save that money. And that's why I was concerned that I can't save it out of my budget this year, but we'll be able to save some out of my budget this year.
Do you have any vacant positions in your department?
No, I have one unfunded vacant position, so I don't have any that has money attached to it.
Well, I want to make it clear to you and to anybody else that's listening and cares that I'm not opposed to having the expertise that we need. My opposition is to adding employees without the money there to do it. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to help find some of that money. That's why I'm asking you these questions, okay? In the proposed budget, the salary line, the 6105 line, only went up $1,100. So where was this position, this now $66,000 position budgeted?
I'd have to defer to Pam. I didn't have last year's budget, as far as how it was done.
In last year's budget in FY15, the unfunded position is actually in 6103 in that line prior to 6105. And so actually, when you add the 6103 and 6105, the salary savings and the salaries together, it's would be a net reduction of about $45,000. This year, that unfunded position was not budgeted in salary savings. We just didn't budget that position at all. So it's really an increase when you add the two together.
Okay, on the printout that you gave us, there's not a 6103. It starts at 6105, so that $45,000 doesn't show on this.
It might be on the prior page, at the bottom of the prior page.
Okay. The other question that I have, and this is you've told us that we've spent $50,000 in consulting fees, and again, that doesn't show in the budget. The consulting fees for FY15 was budgeted at 0 and is budgeted at $5,000 for 15, and the contractual services is budgeted this year at 30 and for FY16 at 13. Where is that $50,000 that you've been talking about that you spent this last week coming from?
It came from the RMS budget.
So it didn't come from your budget at all?
Correct, and that's why it's kind of hard to judge, because I actually am spending someone else's money on that service that it would have saved them money.
You know, for somebody who has some problems following some of this, it sure would be helpful if all of this was in one place, and it's not your, it's not you.
Yes, ma'am, because each project...
I'm not an accountant and could not play one on TV, so...
The way each project's funded with the city, IAS World was granted funding, RMS was granted funding, and to put those projects together, I'm spending the money from those projects on these consulting. And that's really why it doesn't reflect in my budget. So during the year, the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent by technology on this kind of service is really coming from other people's budget or other projects. So when you voted the IAS World, part of that you'll see is consulting fees is in that budget, and that's money I'm spending. But out of the $49,000, I would have only needed $10,000 of that had I had this position. But it's really someone else's money that I'm spending.
So when you're talking to me about all this, Dr. Tiller, you need to speak in small words and very slowly so that I get it, okay? Okay. I think that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, great. We have Councilor Baker.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just real quick. I understand the point. The cost of the position is assigned to your department, but the savings may filter in somewhere else. So I guess my question for the finance director or deputy city manager would be: do we do in our cost allocation model that we assign to all of around the city-wide? Is there a reduction that could be made in the cost allocation model to offset the increase for his particular position?
In the cost allocation, IT is part of cost allocation, and there's various allocations that are made based on computers, number of phones. What he's referring to is the consulting services related specifically to the implementation of a project. So when RMS was put into place, there was consulting services attached to the total cost of that project that council approved. The same with IAS World, and those are project costs associated with the implementation of that project.
It's project specific.
Project
It wouldn't be
specific.
built into an overall allocation model spread out to everybody.
No, only the IT department budget that's in the general fund is the basis for the allocation, for cost allocation.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
All right. I believe, okay, we've got Counselor Huff.
Good morning. Going back to Councilor Allen's question about anyone being in your department for training, I have a real issue with the number of people that work for this government that never get an opportunity to move up. So my question is, there's no one in your department or no choices of 2 or 3 people that could be trained over the next year to be in that slot to still save additional monies and bring somebody in at a lower pay grade to do the other services and jobs?
Well, generally speaking, what would happen is normally you would have this position in any IT organization, and that person is who actually trains internal. And I do expect that most of the internal candidates, most future would be internal. But currently, since you don't have someone on the level to mentor, you really don't have that ability inside the department, because these are things that really take 5 to 10 years to learn. You really want someone experienced already doing governmental enterprise agreements. Once you get that in place, I fully expect that the next people would be internal, and they would be in the positions. Let's see if I go the right way. Where you have a network specialist, we have a PC specialist also. Those positions, once we turn them into UGA, I'm sure are going to be upgraded slightly. Those type people, I think, would be, although you can't promise a position, next in line, those type people. But you really, until you have someone that knows it, you can't have trained it. In other words, this isn't like you can go to school. Part of it's going to school, part of it's experience already doing it, and part of it is just years of knowledge. It takes time to move from being a Tech 1 through being a network engineer, someone that's done all the tasks. And it's just that to compress the time, I don't think we can compress the time. That's my biggest concern, is not having someone that's already there. And then you could make mistakes, and it would still add to consulting costs.
Okay, so with your new network engineer, how would that affect the ones coming up later? Over a 5-year period, will they be cross-trained in any way to be able to
Absolutely.
be prepared to move in the future?
I've already started doing training with Cisco and Microsoft, and with the new Microsoft contract, we also have training. It just takes time, and I think that it would probably take, most studies show it's a 3 to 5 year period to get someone into that role, and in 3 to 5 years, we'll be in 2018-19, and I don't think we can afford to wait is all. But I do foresee that I do have staff members that are very promising. They just don't have time to move into that skill level.
Okay, but training will continue.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Just want to reiterate, I come from a training background. My real goal is to make sure that they're very marketable somewhere else even. Because if you got them even for a short time, you want them all trained. And that is really, my impetus for doing this, is I want to train the people I have so I don't have to go outside.
Thank you.
All right. And next we have Counselor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, would it be possible for council to get quarterly updates on the savings, just so we can keep track of that?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And quarterly, I can have the finance director, as part of the finance update, include that on the list quarterly.
And if Mr. Tolley comes, I agree with Councilor Thomas, it would be good to speak in layman's terms, and so we can understand what's going on. It also concerns me that the way we have it broken out, it's in different departments, so it's difficult for it to be tracked back to the savings that IT is producing. But I'm real concerned about going forward. I've spoken with several people in IT since this issue came up, and all of them say that we need it, and their point was that over the past 10 or 15 years, the city has not allowed quality folks to be hired in the IT department for whatever reason. It's mayor, it's council, it's city manager. All of us are, I'm painting us all with the same brush. We're all guilty of that. We live in a new world. I mean, technology has been out there for a long time, and we're paying the price now because we didn't take the necessary steps to do that. To be honest, I was looking for a way not to approve this position because I didn't want to add another position. But in my discussions with the IT folks, it is critical. It's a critical position. And finding a way to fund it is the problem.
Well, and Councilor Allen, I'll say to you, as I said to the budget chair just yesterday, I didn't solicit department heads calling me. They actually contacted me because they wanted to come and stand with him today because they understand the importance of this position. And they asked me, and I think they asked me, Mayor, in your office after a meeting, one person did, if I would object to that. And I told them no. They just understand the importance. And they said that a number of department heads had come together and said they wanted to be here. I don't know why they didn't come and stand, but they told me. They told me that they understand the importance of this position. And so, and I'm glad that you're saying the IT staff conveyed that to you as well.
Well, IT people, I talk with the community,
I'm sorry.
Not IT.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And the city. I know some of them have a vested interest in this position coming in, and I wanted to get a non-biased opinion.
Sure.
But I do see Ms. Beegler and the fire chief back there, so they're here in spirit.
Yeah.
And Donna.
In fact, the fire chief called me as well, so he understands.
They may not be standing at the podium, but they're here. So
I think elections had an interest in the elections department.
I'll say Nancy Bohr in that, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
So.
I'm sure the tax commissioner, sure. All right, we have next Councilor Thomas.
Mayor, we have two motions on the table, and I want to make sure that I understand each one of them before we get to the vote.
Sure, and I appreciate you saying that. I only recall one being put on the table and seconded. So, Madam Clerk, could you clarify for us? I'm sorry, let me get your mic on. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we do have two motions. The first motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilor Henderson to authorize the position in the budget. Then Councilor Henderson came and made a motion, seconded by Councilor Allen, to eliminate the funding of the deputy in the marshal's office.
Oh.
And does that go on then to use that money to pay for this position?
It's an offset. The idea behind that was to offset the cost of adding this position.
Okay, so there's two separate motions.
The only reason, I apologize, ma'am, the only reason I didn't tie it to it is I didn't want to jeopardize this position being approved because it's been explained to me how critical it is. But I did want to offer an opportunity to offset the additional cost that adding that person would bring.
So if we approve Councilor Henderson's motion,
There'd be a reduction.
and do not approve Mayor Pro Tem's motion, we have eliminated a position in the marshal's office, but have not created this new position. Is
We'll
that
have more of a cushion.
parliamentary correct?
Yes. Okay, and we do work backwards, is that right, Mr. City Attorney? We work backwards. Okay, we have, is that right? Okay, and we have, let's see, Councilor Davis.
Mayor, it's not to the motion.
Okay. All right, well, let's work backwards then. We've got Councilor Henderson's motion to eliminate a position or funding, excuse me, to eliminate funding for a position in the marshal's office. And yes, we have Counselor Thomas.
When we did the add delete, we eliminated the funding for 2 positions, so this would be the 3rd position, is that correct? Correct. Okay, thank you.
It's not filled.
Funding.
Equal to that unfilled position.
All right, and Pam, do you want to tell us how much that is? What would that funding amount be?
That amount is $49,049.
Okay. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
I didn't think there was another unfilled position.
Right. There's 1 position unfilled, there's 1 position on administrative leave. The rest positions are filled, but remember, we are transferring funding. Which positions they pick would be up to the officer, the elected officer. The only thing we can do is eliminate funding equating to a position. And
Right,
so whether it's the vacant position or a filled position, that will be the choice of the elected official.
I thought we eliminated 2 positions.
Yes, we did. And this would be a 3rd. The funding. So it would be equating to 3 times, what is it, Pam?
$49,049.
Okay, so 3 times that.
But that was,
Correct. Okay, let's see, Counselor Henderson.
And the reason for identifying that as an opportunity to offset this additional expense is because as we went through the motions of eliminating the funding for 2 of those positions, it was recognized by this council or by this budget committee that 2 positions were already not filled, as it were. So there was no net loss. So actually, even though this is a difficult thing to do in reducing personnel, this is only a net loss of 1 individual within that department. And we had made the comments and had the agreement from the chief of police that if it did result in any individuals that were no longer able to work in the marshal's department or even the sheriff's office when we were discussing that item, that they would be given first opportunity to sign on with the police department. Thus, it would not weaken our public safety situation, and in fact, it would actually help our police department in adding people to that department.
All right, we have Counselor Huff.
Councilor Henderson. Did we not also have the opportunity for that person to apply to Public Works?
Oh, yours. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, and I believe so. I think the idea was that we were going to give them absolute preference in any position that would value a post-certified officer.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see now, Counselor Davis, did you want to speak to
I'll do the motion, Mayor.
the motion of the marshal? Okay. All right, so that concludes discussion on the issue related to funding of equating to 1 additional position in the marshal's office. All those, and is this one I can queue up? I don't think it is. No, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
That's the marshal.
Yes, yes. All right, do we need to take account, ma'am? Okay, she's got it. All right, so then we move on to the second motion, which was our Mayor Pro Tem's motion, which related to adding the position of a network administrator. Is that the correct time?
Network
Engineer,
engineer,
excuse me. And that is, Pam, how much, the value?
$66,636.
$66,636.
So,
Okay.
to the
And
motion.
so that's a motion to add, and it has been seconded. Is there any discussion related to the network engineer
To the
position?
motion for clarification. To the motion.
This is the motion to add a network engineer to the IT department.
Correct. So we, Counselor Henderson dealt with funding. This is adding the position.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. There being no further discussion, all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? Okay. You want to take account? Do you have that? Okay. All right. Where are we? Oh, we've got Counselor Davis back up.
Are you taking account, Mayor? Or is the clerk-
Tiny, are you done? Are you
clerk's
clear
fine?
on the pros and the cons for that one? Okay.
Mayor, I submit to you, I submit to the council, this is another example of
what I talked about benchmarking these projected cost savings that are being presented to us. We've made a lot of changes during this budget. We've got a lot of department heads that are going out on a limb and saying that we're doing cost savings, cost avoidance, and these things need to be benchmarked, and we need to track them along the way to make sure. Because if it's not, then this council needs to know that we made the wrong decision, or we need to relook at a matter.
Yeah.
And how that's done, I'm assuming it would be done through whether the auditor or the administration, but we don't have that, so to speak, city stats. Was that it? We don't have that, so to speak, but this is an example of what Councilor Henderson's been talking about for a long time now, and I think it's very appropriate in these times that we start doing that.
Great. Well, I do too, and I think we have made such incredible, frankly, from a legislative perspective, brave decisions to change things. We had the situation with health care and the pension and all of that, and we do benchmark those, and I think we can easily benchmark these as the city manager has set forward. And so as we make these decisions, we just have to watch to see if it bears the fruit we thought it would. So thank you. All right.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
And just for clarification, and to our Deputy City Manager Finance, the $49,004 will go towards the new position, and that will not change the bottom line on the current proposed budget. It remains the same, and that gets us 75% of the way. And Councilor Davis, as you talked about, if we see another way to bring them on earlier, we will. That would not impact the fund balance. But if not, we'll bring that person on at an appropriate time during the fiscal year that they would stay within the $49,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And we will, Councilor Davis.
Madam Mayor, I have another matter pertaining to the operating budget.
Okay.
Is it appropriate at this time to discuss it?
I think we're still in the first read of the operating budget, so.
I would like to bring up for reconsideration to the council. I am still really concerned about the matter with the integrated waste fund on the mandating of the removal of, or deletion, elimination of all plastic bags for trash and yard waste. I really think that this is going to be a big issue. I think it's going to be I think council's going to get hit hard with this from the citizenry, and that's the way I feel about it. I'm just not convinced yet. I think this is a matter that that instead of mandating it, I think that we can kind of ease into this. Maybe from an education standpoint, I think we still need to look at the standpoint of actually what we're doing here, and I have not been convinced that we're not just passing on an extra cost of living to the citizenry, even though we're terming it as cost avoidance. I still think there's going to be even issues with what is being proposed with the biodegradable bags and plastic containers of that sort. I still think there's going to be some issues there as it relates to the model of both plastic bags and pickup and pickup times with the trucks, wear and tear on the trucks. I still think that's going to be an issue, and I question that. I think we need to further analyze this. We've got a person now that's on board with Public Works and funded out of the Integrated Waste Fund, that Gloria Weston Smart with Keep Columbus Beautiful, that could make this as one of her priorities in educating and communicating to the community, and hopefully that they would voluntarily get on board with this and maybe have the opportunity to ease into it. I think that this is just going, at this point, there's not enough awareness in the community, both awareness to the citizens of what's going to happen, and it's going to be one of those things that once it's implemented, our phones are going to ring off the hook. I promise you that. Our phones are going to ring off the hook. And I still think there's going to be an issue from the standpoint of businesses and how they choose to stock their stores, and even from a competitive standpoint. I just think it's going to be an excessive cost to the citizenry. I know that we've talked about the issue of cost avoidance. I found that. Councilor Allen brought up a new proposal that passed, which was an additional $495,000 that we talked about of cost avoidance. And I think that if you take that and you substitute it, it would, for the cost avoidance that is being proposed, it becomes a wash. So it's not an issue that, the issue of cost avoidance has been addressed. And I would like to put that out as a reconsideration to council and make a motion that be taken out of the budget for this year and continue to be evaluated.
All right. That's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, second for discussion. Pam, can you just tell us what the impact of that might or might not be to refresh our recollection from those discussions?
What was included in the budget was the elimination of the use of plastic bags. What was included on the add delete list was to eliminate glass recycling. Both of those items that Councilor Davis is referring to as cost avoidance of 3 trucks and drivers. And I think what his suggestion is by eliminating the glass recycling, you've reached the goal that was presented in the original budget of the 3 trucks and drivers, and that now we're netting an additional 3 trucks and drivers, which is much needed in the Public Works Department. So I'll let Pat address the specifics of that particular program, but it does meet the requirements that she has to provide the other services in her department.
Great. Thank you. Pat?
Well, we've covered a lot of the facts and figures before. I'll just reiterate that we are some 17 trucks and drivers short overall in waste collection. And we are spending probably double the amount of money on overtime, more than double the amount of money that we have in the budget on overtime, just to keep up basically with the pickup services. We do need to make some changes. I have been looking internally for efficiencies because we know what the budget's been like, and I didn't want to propose things that would cost additional money. It's nice to think we could just hire new drivers and trucks, but I know that's not going to happen, and so do you. I have made 3 proposals, and what I can say is each one of those efficiencies, as it turns out, will save 3 trucks and drivers. That would give us an improvement of about 9 trucks and drivers out of the 17 we need, and that's at our current level of recycling. So as recycling increases and I have an increased need for drivers, hopefully we can do some shifting internally without expanding our workforce, which I think is appropriate. And so, if you choose as a body to approve 2 of those and not the 3rd one, that is, of course, your decision, but those 3 trucks and drivers will make a substantial difference in terms of our ability to reduce our overtime, continue to provide service, and hopefully improve our service over the long run. There's no question it's 3 trucks and drivers, so that choice is up to you. Let me add one more thing now that I've thought about it. The proposal from our office is not to implement this change until 14 September, which would mean we would be contacting all the businesses we talked to. None of them carry bags at this time. All of them that we talked to told us that they would bring a supply of bags in if there is a request for them to do so, and if council changes the rules in terms of those biodegradable bags. Will all of them follow up on that? I don't know, but I do believe that many of the businesses will start stocking those biodegradable bags. And we will be putting out a fairly substantial educational program to the public on what needs to happen, why it needs to happen. we're looking at things like even what the cost would be if we purchased biodegradable bags, said, Columbus Recycles, and made those available for people to get used to the idea. So we have a number of ideas. With Gloria's help, and I'm looking forward to having that assistance, we'll be able to do a more intense PR program, but we've got a fairly long list of efforts we will be making to get the word out to the public and get everyone educated.
Okay, Councilor Henderson.
Thank you. Ms. Biegler, and I supported this because I of the strain on our budget that a big fleet places. But do me a favor, break it down to my elementary school level. Clarify what you mean by the cost avoidance. Does that mean that of these 3 proposals, we anticipate an attrition rate of 9 trucks and drivers during the year, and this will avoid 3 of those? Or does it mean that because we anticipate more and more usage on the trucks, we're going to have to buy 3 more to sustain the same things we're doing now? Just paint me a picture so that I can, in my little pea brain, I can get it.
Okay. If you really do some, it takes a little deep analysis, but let me give you the kind of overview. Yeah. Okay. You put a driver and 2 inmates on a truck, and you send them through a quarter of the city for yard waste each day during the workday. If you look at how many households they stop at on average, how long those stops are, and with the yard waste, stopping and cutting open and emptying each and every bag is a pretty substantial amount of time, and so there are a lot of bags out there. You can shorten the amount of time they're having to stop at each stop, and if you look at, if it takes, for example, 9 trucks to make those stops with the current time we have now, and to do the cut the bag open, empty it out, put the bag somewhere else, go get another one, empty it, you go through that motion multiple times. If you can shorten that considerably, then you can basically reduce the number of trucks and drivers we need to perform that task by 3 trucks and drivers.
And I get that, but I'm where I get confused is looking at calendar year 14. We had that fleet in existence, and they were doing just that, which is when you brought it to us, and I appreciate the recommendation where they're having to slow down, cut those things, and then they're even having to put those plastic bags on another truck and take it out to our landfill.
Yes.
I get all that, but I guess where I'm asking is at what point do those savings manifest themselves? Because what we're really doing is avoiding wear and tear on 3 existing trucks, right?
Yes and no. Because we are so short of trucks to complete the entire mission, and remember, we pick up trash, we pick up recycling, we pick up yard waste, et cetera. With the shortage we have, what we're going to see right now is if we could make that change today, we would need 3 fewer trucks to complete that particular task. We could have those trucks running other routes.
Deployed somewhere else.
And when we start each morning, 9 to 13 trucks short, 9 to 13 routes that don't have drivers and operators on them, and then we're pushing everybody else to finish up so that we can move them from the route they're trying to complete to the routes that we haven't even started because we don't have drivers and trucks, then the amount of overtime, whether it's Wednesdays or later at night or whatever, is going to be $600,000 this year to pay in overtime. Now, so I don't have the luxury of saying I don't need those 3 trucks and drivers. I do desperately. But it's still, as we reduce overtime on the whole fleet, it will reduce the amount of overtime, which means all of that overtime will be time when we're not out there driving, when we're not pushing our drivers, and our trucks might actually get back to the shop and get appropriate maintenance instead of being out on the routes as late as we can go and on Wednesdays.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes and no.
Okay.
to quote one of my favorite department heads. Yes and no.
Councilor Davis,
And Ms. Bigler, I don't mean any disrespect by this. You know where I stand on this, and I just see it from a totally different angle. But, you know, as I look the past couple years and where we're at now and where we're going, you know, really, I'm looking at starting to unravel and you know, all really we're doing is passing on this extra cost to the citizens. It's an indirect tax. It's an indirect tax. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to fund the service. We're just going to pass it on to everybody else. It's going to be a cost. There's going to be a cost of living increase, okay? And from a business perspective, I'm just trying to look at this, you know, is what we're doing now, you know, taking a bite out of the elephant every year? We're talking about eliminating services right now, but I promise you, next year, somebody's going to propose going up on the integrated waste fund, with an integrated waste fee, and then because we're going to have to buy new trucks. And it's going to be continuing something every year, and the citizens are eventually going to say, we're getting a raw deal. And that's what I'm concerned about. So are we better, should we even be having this topic about plastic bags, or should we just be talking about raising the integrated waste fee right now and solve the issues? And that's my concern, is that eventually the citizens are smart. They understand. They're going to see it. And, you know, you can only pass on their costs. Less money would come out of their pocket. I'm convinced less money would come out of their pocket if we just raise the integrated waste fee, or find, you know, I even proposed something on a temporary measure where we would just buy the recycling cans and the bags for the citizenry at a cost savings, a tremendous cost savings, just by the ability of the purchasing power that we have. That's a deal. You know, it's just something that I've been thinking through as we've been working through this, but, you know, we can't keep coming in every year. We've raised the integrated waste fund the last few years. Now we're coming in with this. What's next year? What's the following year? And I'm just thinking there's maybe a bigger plan that the council doesn't know about here, but we're just biting away at it 1 year at a time. So I do think that this is a matter. I do think that what's on the table, I'm just asking for a reconsideration with a motion that we continue to explore this matter and educate the community and ask them from a voluntary point, would you do this for us so we can incur cost savings, and let them do that and let them buy into it, versus the mandating is going to be, I think, it's going to be a problem. I may be wrong, I may be completely wrong, but I'm trying to do my responsibility as a citizen's representative. So please don't take that as disrespect. I love you. You're awesome. You do a tremendous job, and you're serving this city well, and so are your folks. And I say that wholeheartedly. And you've always been responsive. Whenever there's a need and somebody needs help, you've always been responsive, and I appreciate that. It just happens to be we're not seeing eye to eye on this one matter. But that's part of my job, is to deal with some of these tough challenges.
Well,
and yours too.
let me, if I may, say one or two more things. For a number of years now, the program simply has not been funded the way it should. And everyone sees collection as being the major part of the issue. Well, collection is only a very small part. The number of trucks, we're short. The condition of trucks is appalling. And I don't know how much longer we can keep going without some changes. But you have to look further than that, and you also have to look at the landfills and the amount of money we're spending on those and how fast we're filling them up. And I would be delighted if you all would walk in and say, here's the money you need, let's make this happen. Now, whether you choose to bite it off 1 year at a time, or whether you can find a way to make it happen so what we need to do happens, that responsibility rests with you. My responsibility is to tell you, without demanding a whole lot of cash that we don't have, what some of the options are. How you choose to act on those is entirely up to you. And I and my staff will continue to do the best job we possibly can, keep conveying ideas that we have and efficiencies we can identify in any way we can, so that we can continue to provide the service the city needs and deserves.
And Ms. Bigler, I respect that.
Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Pat, I'm just trying to think of a way to try to help citizens through this, this additional cost that Councilor Davis described, and we pick up recyclables once a week. The recyclable container looks like it has the ability to be picked up by a mechanical
Yes.
apparatus and dumped into a truck.
We have lifter arms on a number of our trucks now. Not all of our trucks have those lifter arms. We've been slowly retrofitting, but many of our trucks are now so old that spending the money to install lifter arms is not probably something we should be doing. But yes, we can.
Some people put out their recyclable can once a month or periodically. They don't do it every week.
Yes.
Would you be acceptable to allowing them to use the recyclable can for yard waste?
I'm going to do my favorite yes and no. That would be a solution. I would have to look at the number of trucks we have with lifter arms, and if we had an adequate number that could pick up both recycling and yard waste. Certainly what we're asking is that if they're putting yard waste in containers, say be 32 gallons or less, because that's kind of the limit that can be lifted without someone injuring themselves. So yes, the flip side of that for me is I really very much want to keep encouraging recycling, because that has, raises more revenue and slows down the life, extends the life of our landfill. And if we can't get citizens recycling carts, then also finding them for the yard waste is, now our bins, we're using those less and less as we add more of the large carts. That would be great. We could do that. I would ultimately love to have standard containers for all of our things that we pick up so that we could just go flip them and keep on going. But we need to develop a strategy for funding.
Well, I'd really like for you to look at that a little more closely. It just seems, well, I agree with Councilor Davis. It's cost shifting. It's taking it out of our pocket and forcing the citizens to pay for it. And we talked about it at the budget meeting, the supply and demand issue. If we're mandating paper bags, then the stores are going to put a nice price on them. So the other question I had was, we currently have, once the budget's passed, we will shift away from picking up glass.
Correct.
Some homes still have the bin for the glass containment.
Yes.
What do we plan to do with those?
Let them to continue to use that for recycling, pick them up if they wish us to do it, or they can put yard waste in those bins. That would not be a problem.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, and we have the Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Fiedler, what if, instead of starting in September, what if we put it off to October, November?
That would not be a problem.
And that way we have some idea of how collections have been going, how the citizenry has adjusted to the no plastic bags.
Actually, I'm trying to remember the dates. Lisa, you have the handouts for. The ordinance says August. Thank you. We were talking about making the yard waste collection, that change October 5th, and the one-day-a-week trash pickup September 14th. And I'm sorry, I confused those two dates when I was talking earlier.
So it's October.
Into October, but it could be pushed back a bit further. We were thinking a good part of the yard waste for the fall, as people are cleaning up their yards and what have you, could go under the old system and they could use up their bags. But we could extend it a bit further if that would be the desire of council.
So that's like 4 or 5 months, and it gives them a chance to really get used to it. And maybe we'll know whether or not the bags, the biodegradable bags will be available in Columbus.
Okay. We have Counselor Allen.
Thank you. And to piggyback on Mayor Pro Tem, it gives us a longer period of time to educate. So, and it takes it on into the year when there's less yard waste produced, but I agree with you. I'd prefer January 1, but.
Okay. All right, and then we have Counselor Davis.
Madam Mayor, I think everybody can tell I'm kind of passionate about this, but I will, my last comment will be, and I'll, just for the sake of the council, we have a social network in our neighborhoods, I think connected to 9, 10 neighborhoods. Councilor Thomas, you've seen it. She's in the neighborhood as well. And I did put this out as a sample poll, as a poll question, and the majority said that they did not want to see it leave, but if it did, that they would rather pay for the service versus seeing it eliminated. And that just showed me that there was more of a concern here that they want to keep this service, and if it was valuable enough to them that they would pay for it if it needed to be a cost savings. Now then all of a sudden the cost avoidance came in there, which made it even more. So I am just trying to, and also I will say there's people in that I represent that are in favor of this, of your proposal. I will say that, but on the poll I did, a majority, a good bit of a majority wanted to see this service stay at this point. Mayor, I think I had a motion.
Yeah, that's what I was just getting up to date on because I had to step out for a moment. We have more discussion. Madam Clerk, could you read the motion again? I'm sorry I wasn't available. Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe the motion is to ask for reconsideration on the proposal to eliminate the plastic bags.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Henderson.
Well, and I just wanted to clarify, I understand where Councilor Davis is coming from with regards to saying that this is a pass-through fee. And it is, but I don't know, I think it's a user fee. In other words, the folks who are going to use the service, that have clippings picked up, that don't hire a yard waste company, that don't take care of it in some other manner, they're the ones that will pay for it because they will be utilizing the service. Whereas if we just increased the garbage fee across the board, you would also be hitting some of the constituents that don't take advantage of the yard waste pickup opportunities for one reason or another. So I too am not pleased about it. I don't like adding any fees at all to what the citizens pay, but when faced with an either or, I've always favored the user fees more than the across the board. That way the folks that utilize the service and enjoy the service are the ones that help to support it and are impacted by it. So, but I understand exactly where you're coming from. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Okay, it looks like discussion is concluded on this matter, and so we are voting then to eliminate the requirement that there be no plastic bags, as I understand it. All those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, let's do a count if you would, Madam Clerk.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And opposed? It's 1, 2, 3.
It's inconclusive, and so the item will stay. Okay, I think we've got another motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we delay the use of the paper bags until January 1.
Okay. That is a motion and a second to delay the implementation of a prohibition from using plastic bags with yard waste. And we have discussion with Councilor Thomas.
Mayor, we have later in the city attorney's agenda a first reading on an ordinance to mandate this that has a date in it. So would this motion
go to that?
amend that,
Yes,
that
ma'am.
ordinance, that proposed ordinance?
Yes, ma'am.
And then when this proposed ordinance comes back for a second reading in 2 weeks, if it is defeated, then the plastic bag piece is defeated. Is that correct? Is eliminated. Is that correct?
Okay, if that particular ordinance is defeated.
Is not passed.
Is not passed, then
Then
there would be
where
no
are we?
prohibition. Yes, ma'am. If the
Okay.
ordinance related to the plastic bags does not pass, there would be no prohibition against plastic bags.
Okay.
If my motion, is that?
And how
No, I
would
was
that?
talking, I'm sorry now.
Is she-
I thought
are
she
you
was
talking
talking
about
about the
my
motion
No,
that's
no,
later on.
I'm talking
Okay.
about, there's an ordinance, item number 9 in the city attorney's agenda.
Right.
That provides for this prohibition on plastic bags.
Yes.
And my question is, when it comes back to us on second reading in 2 weeks, or a week, whenever it's coming back, and it is not passed, then where are we?
Okay, because there's two things, and we're not now speaking to Counselor Allen's motion. Counselor Thomas's question, as I understand it, Mr. City Attorney, is that if the ordinance, which is right now being sought to be amended, somewhat out of order, as you point out, is not passed in a week, then the prohibition will not exist.
And what impact will that have on the budget? Any? None?
Well, it will have Pam, do you want to address that? It'll have the cost avoidance impact. And I think there was some monetary value.
If it is not adopted, this ordinance is not adopted, what impact will that have on the budget?
It will not change the total dollar amount of the budget. What it will do is have the cost avoidance that was going to be recognized of those 3 trucks and drivers not be there. So the overtime savings that she would expect to have seen would not happen. So the overtime will still be generated at the level that it is now.
And in the budget, that cost avoidance was not used for something else? Or was used for something else?
No, it just allows her to fill the vacant routes. Those 3 trucks and drivers were filling those vacant routes that did not have a driver with them when she starts the day, that she just kind of walked through that process. So that reduces the amount of overtime that's expended each year. Because at this point, she's exceeding her overtime budget and would continue to do that and have to be made up within other object codes if that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Counselor Allen, I believe, did you still have the floor, sir?
No, I just made that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion at this time to amend, which is item number, Mr. City Attorney, which item is it on our agenda so we can? Number 9. To postpone the implementation of item number 9 related to the plastic bags and yard waste until January 1, 2016. And we have the Mayor Pro Tem with further discussion.
And as I understand it, it's to delay the mandatory date to January 1, but we are going to try to start
Yes.
now.
Education, yes, ma'am.
Soon.
Yep, you can voluntarily start it today.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. All those in favor of the motion to amend the date to January 1, 2016, please state aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
Okay, the date then in item 9, section 3 will be changed to January 1, 2016. Okay. We still on the operating budget, Mayor?
Yes, we are, and I have Counselor Davis with further
Well,
discussion.
And out of this discussion, Mr. City Manager and Madam Mayor, I guess, you know, Director Bigler has talked a lot about some of these concerns that she has, and it sounds like the issue regarding overtime and trucks and drivers and all, if it sounds like that's a problem, then I'm hoping that we have some kind of a plan to start maybe solving or dealing with that efficiently from a revenue standpoint in the respective department.
Sure. I think that is what she does every day, and I think that's what we've attempted to do with the glass and the other things. So, and maybe we can have an update at another work session or something. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any further discussion related to the operating budget for FY16?
All right, let's see if anybody in the audience wants to be heard. This is a public hearing.
Okay.
All right, don't see any other hands. With that, as amended, we will go for a vote next week on the operating budget. It's 9:00 a.m. next week. Next item up, Mayor, is the ordinance for the non-operating budgets, such as Urban Development, Economic Development Fund, Home, Program, HUD, Forfeiture Funds, Hotel Motel Tax. That's ready for any discussion.
All right. I do not see any discussion at this time.
All right, we'll bring it back for a vote next week. With council's permission, we'll call 5, 6, 7, and 8 all together. These are ordinances for funding the General Government Employees Pension Plan, Public Safety Pension Plan, Major Disability Income Plan, and the Death Benefit Plan. Those are all on the table for any discussion. Any questions?
There is no discussion at this time.
Okay, we'll vote on those next week. Number 9, we have just amended the effective date. Any other discussion on that item?
No, sir.
All right. Number 10, this is the update of the poverty guidelines for low-income households on the residential garbage rate. Any questions? Okay,
No,
we'll
sir.
vote on it next week. Last item, we've got a resolution that would authorize the 911 charges, E911, and prepaid wireless. That's ready for a vote.
We've got a motion and a second. Seeing that there's no discussion, please record your votes electronically. And it passes. Thank you.
All right. The only other thing, Mayor, we would ask for a short executive session on matters in litigation. That's all we have listed.
Great, thank you. All right, I believe that concludes then the city attorney's agenda, and we will go to our public agenda at this time. And first up, we have Reverend Clyott, representing Tree of Life Healthcare and the opening of Tree of Life Healthcare. Sir, if you'd like to come forward to the podium. And I can officially say good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, and thank you for having us this morning, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and City Manager and Council. Thank you for allowing us to come before you again. We really appreciate the proclamation that was given the other day, and thank you again for that recognition. I asked my staff to be here again this morning. I asked you to allow them to introduce themselves, and I'm extremely proud of them. First of all, let me just say a little bit about True Life. We're a nonprofit free healthcare clinic. We're located on the campus of Midtown Medical at 1968 North Avenue, and we're working as a diversion as well with the emergency department, relieving some of the stress there. Working with have affiliation with some of the universities, allowing some of the students to have clinical hours, but most importantly, here to provide free quality health care to citizens in our area, both here in West Georgia and East Alabama, that don't have the needs of the insurance to provide their care. We, of course, deal with the homeless, but now in our nation, in our area in particular, it's more than about just the homeless. It is about the person that sitting on the pews next to your church. It's about the person that work with you, your neighbor, your family members, for whatever reason find themselves in a position where they can't afford quality health care for themselves or for their family. So with that said, that's our mandate, is to do that, is to be a stopgap for that. Let me also say that we're looking for volunteers as well. Through the Georgia Public Health Care, they will provide coverage, liability coverage for those practitioners or doctors and nurses that want to volunteer at no cost. They're also our credentialing source as well, and which is they have really streamlined that process. It really is a one-page application with a signature page. And so we're asking those in our community that in the healthcare profession that want to find a place to volunteer, look at us. We would certainly need you. At this time as well, I'd like to, of course, ask for support. We are 501(c)(3) corporate citizens who want to place their money and help provide that service for the citizens in this area. We appreciate that. Individuals as well that want to give, we appreciate that as well. And also, as some churches that are looking for a home mission, we appreciate your help as well. We also take the opportunity to invite council and others that are here today to be a part of our grand opening. That's June 18th at 2 o'clock, open to the general public. Please come by and visit with us. And let me also extend a personal invitation to each one of you here at a time that's convenient for you to come by, just tour our facility and look at what we're doing here in our city. And let me also say we have gotten an excellent lesson in civic patience today. I really appreciate you and what you do. And let me say that I know the job that you do is not easy, but we appreciate you, your time, your service, and your due diligence, as we've seen today. Let me, again, just take this opportunity to, let me just say this one thing before I allow my staff to introduce themselves. These are full-time volunteers, and they have a heart for this city, a heart for this community, and they've given of themselves and their time and their talents to make available those in our community who need quality free health care. That said, if there are any questions for me, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and we'll entertain any questions you may have for us today.
Okay. Let's see, Councilor Huff had a comment.
Yeah,
Yes,
quick question.
Yes,
June
sir.
18th, 2 o'clock?
Yes, sir.
Address?
1968 North Avenue. We're located on the campus of Midtown Medical, and we'd love to see you there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Introductions. Just say hello. You've patiently waited all this time.
My name is Ed McCall, and I'm the clinical manager at the clinic.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Perkins. I'm the office administrator. Previously, I had worked at Blue Cross and Blue Shield for 38 years with Ms. Pugh. And it is a phenomenal facility. And I think once you come over and take a tour, you'll be thoroughly impressed.
Hello, my name is Christine Poindexter. I'm the Social Service Director, and we're educating the community about the needs of health prevention and the medical needs that they have here for.
All right, whoops.
Good afternoon. My name is Lucille Armour, and I'm presently office manager at the Tree of Life Healthcare. We're welcoming, as Pastor Clyde said, the volunteers and anyone that wants to come by and view the facility.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Y'all have a blessed evening, and come by and visit with us.
All right. All right. Thank you all so much. And now we have Mr. Joey Klein, representing American Fuel Systems, would like to speak to us about alternative fuel. Mr. Klein? All right. Well, if he comes back before we get to the end, we certainly will hear from him. And next we have the very patient, Henry McCoy, and a group representing the Columbus Public Library to speak with us about StoryCorps. And I understand that it's Miss Gloria Battle's birthday. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. 79 years young.
Well, we wish you hearty congratulations on that, ma'am. Thank you for being here, and we hate that you've had to spend hours with us on your birthday, but are so glad that you're here. Congratulations. Yes,
Madam
sir.
Mayor, councilors, city officers, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. Let me tell you a story about a library, a small but adequate library built for the colored citizens of this town about 70 years ago. Let me tell you a story about one lady who nurtured those 3 or 4 small rooms in that adequate library to make sure it had something of substance to offer this community. And let me tell you a story about the children who came and listened to this lady and got a book, or took a piano lesson, or heard a story, and would take those lessons and others to one day grow up to be U.S. Superior Court judges, city councilors and managers, some of whom might be in this room as I speak, school teachers, representatives of the armed forces, best-selling authors, and good, productive citizens of Columbus, of Georgia, and of the United States. Stories are sacred. Stories are political because stories have power, and they have power because they are our real history. And now is our time to save these stories. I'm very pleased to inform you about the Mildred Terry Memory Project, a long dreamed about effort to capture and preserve the precious memories of this city of Columbus. Its leaders, yes, but more importantly, its citizens. From nearly 350 applicants, the Chattahoochee Valley Libraries was one of only 10 library systems nationwide chosen to receive the StoryCorps at Your Library grant. This grant provides money, training, free recording equipment, and archival expertise to allow us to collect for free the oral histories of the people of this community. Begun in 2003, StoryCorps is the nation's preeminent collector of oral histories. Perhaps you have heard their stories aired every Friday on NPR. And in its 12 years existence, StoryCorps has recorded over 50,000 interviews with over 80,000 participants nationwide. And they have now empowered and trained the staff of the Chattahoochee Valley Libraries to bring that mission to our area. And that is why we are here. We want your stories. And I don't mean just city council or the constitutional officers. I mean we want the stories of everybody in this community. Everyone has an important story to tell, a story that is of value to your family, to your friends, to your community. Each one of you is probably thinking, well, I'm too busy, I don't have time, and you're coming up with excuses right now. But the truth of the matter is each and every one of you has something of importance to us all, the recollection of how our lives really were. We have dates, we have contracts, we have headlines. We need to preserve the history of how we live. So from now through October, we will be happy to help you preserve your stories and memories for free. And in return, you will receive a free CD copy of your interview, and your interview will be preserved in the Library of Congress, American Folklife Center, and in certain instances, the Smithsonian Institution. Now, the StoryCorps interview is different from other oral histories. Instead of seeking facts or dates, we are seeking stories. And to help you tell your stories, we encourage you to bring a friend, a family member, or a coworker to swap tales of your youth and adulthood. By having someone with whom you are comfortable conversing with you, the final interview is lively and very full of emotion. And your interview can help in service to the community. After this recording period is finished, the Chattahoochee Valley Libraries will be embarking on a second phase of the Mildred Terry Memory Project, that of cataloging and preserving, in both written and digital form, the history of the library and its surrounding community. With the vast changes starting to happen, it's important that we collect these stories now, before they are lost to time. So, how can anyone participate? After you book your appointment, you simply report to the Mildred Terry Public Library on Veterans Parkway. And from there, you will be escorted into the StoryCorps recording studio. We'll fill out data sheets and a release form, make some technical adjustments, and then start recording your conversation. That's it. Most recording sessions last about 40 minutes, and the entire process is usually completed in a little over an hour. Here's how anybody at home or you can sign up. The first way is to visit our library website, cvlga.org, and from there look for the big orange button that says StoryCorps. This will take you to our scheduling website where you can choose a time and date that's convenient for you. And if you like, you can also call the Mildred L. Terry Branch Library at 706-243-2782, and a staff member can help you choose your time. Now, for all participants, we send you a packet containing interview tips and a list of possible questions and topics to help you plan your conversation. And should you need to report without a friend or family member, don't worry, we can also serve as your interview facilitator and partner. We have already completed 20 interviews so far with folks like Judge John Allen, Gloria Weston Smart, Benny Newroth, Bunky McClung Clark, VJ Roberts, and our very first interview, which was conducted with the birthday girl here, Ms. Gloria Battle. She wanted to say a couple of words.
Members of council, today is a great day in Columbus, and it's a great day to let you know how much we need you to to participate in giving your stories about Mildred Terry Library, Fifth Avenue School, or the community that surrounds Mildred Terry Library. Many of you might not be from Columbus. My story was from my connection with Fourth Avenue Library before it became Mildred Terry Library. I came to Columbus, Georgia every Saturday because I grew up in Alabama, Hatchetchubby, Alabama. But we came to town every Saturday, and we went to the Fourth Avenue Library, and there we got a chance to read. We could not check out books because we lived in Alabama. But back in my community, there was a bookmobile, but it was not for people who looked like me. So therefore, I came to Columbus, Georgia on Saturdays to have a chance to read and to check, not to check out, but just to read in the Fourth Avenue Library before it became the Mildred Terry Library. I've been a librarian now in this community for 50 years. I retired the first week in May. And I am happy that I have had a chance to reach many, many people in the Muskogee County School District, starting with Dawson Elementary School, and I ended at Columbus Tech Library. We want you to support this program. If you don't have any connection with it, tell it to somebody else. I'm sure that there are many people in this county who can tell stories about Mildred Terry Library. Thank you for listening, and yes, it is my 79th birthday.
You're looking good.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking on behalf of the inspiration for this program, our branch manager, Sylvia Bunn, who had to run away to conduct a StoryCorps interview. So we have 3 interviews today, 20 more lined up already. I'm going to distribute these cards to each of you so that you can have information about the program. We'll give it to the clerk right here. So on behalf of Sylvia, on behalf of Ms. Battle and all of our library supporters, thank you very much. Please, we beg everybody in this town, come tell us your story.
Great. Thank you, Henry, so much. We've got several folks who want to say hello here. First with the Mayor Pro Tem.
I have to say happy birthday to my sorority sister.
Oh, okay.
And also my neighbor. But she was also the librarian with both of my sons, and she was good, too. And she kept them straight.
Wonderful.
I forgot to acknowledge also Ms. Alberta Shipman, who is a longtime staff member at the Mildred Terry Library, who's been here in support of us today.
Thank you. All right, and we have Councilor Huff.
Good morning. Happy birthday, Ms. Battle. I grew up just a few blocks from there. Used to walk to the library from time to time in several events. So I basically have been trying to figure out for the last 2 weeks now what to say. So I will be participating and coming through with my brother. And I'm trying to get my brother home from California to participate. Thank you.
Can't wait to see you.
Great. All right, we have Councilor Thomas.
Mr. McCoy, I would hope that we as the city could help to spread the word with this. Most of what you have shown us today probably could be shown on our CCG TV. You have a wonderful voice to do a voiceover for something on CCG TV, but I would suggest to you that there are a number of places that your presentation would, I'm sure, reap rewards. One of them is this Friday at 11:30, the Muskogee Association of the Muskogee Retired Educators Association is meeting, and those folks have, you know, a tremendous network, and I'm sure would allow you 5 minutes on their agenda, you know, to do this kind of a presentation, because that then just reaches out and reaches out and reaches out. It's a delightful idea, and I have heard StoryCorps on NPR. So I'm looking forward to hearing Columbus stories and Councilor Huff and others as they do this. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Henry. Appreciate you all. I appreciate your patience today. All right, we're having problems with our timing system, and so what we're going to do is I'm going to have to orally call it. If you could, sir, please clear the time. And then we will announce your 5-minute warning and just sort of orally call it out. So forgive that because I'm not sure it's working there at the podium. It's certainly not working up here. Next, we have Mr. Randy Crumpler, who'd like to speak to us about the city's TNR program for feral cats. Mr. Crumpler? Okay, it doesn't look like Mr. Crumpler is available. If he comes back before we conclude, certainly we'll hear him out of order. Next, we have Mr. Robert Dow, who would like to speak to us about the noise ordinance and parking violations. Thank you, Ms. Battle. Good to see you. Is Mr. Dow in the house? Okay. All right. Well, that concludes our public agenda, and so we will move on then to the city manager's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got just a few things. First is a donation of exercise equipment to the Gallup Senior Center.
We've got a motion to approve item number 1, which is authorization to accept exercise equipment at the Gallup Senior Center. And let's see here. And I've began the electronic voting. Please register your votes. And that passes. Thank you.
I've got the fiscal year 16 Family Connection grant of $46,000. It's an annual grant with no match required.
This is a motion and second to approve the FY16 Family Connection grant. Excuse me. It's simply misnumbered on the agenda. Please record your votes electronically. And it passes. Thank you.
I've got purchases. I've got tennis court surfacing supplies. It's an RF. It's a bid. $15,260 is the annual estimated contract for Parks and Rec for tennis supplies.
We have a motion for purchases to approve purchases A through E. Would anyone like to pull any of these items for particular discussion? Okay, we've got a second to approve items A through E. Thank you, Madam Clerk. No request to pull any particular item. Is there discussion as to any or all? And we'll read them. The first purchase is tennis court surfacing supplies. It's an annual contract. Second, we have the pickup truck, which is a statewide contract. The third is tasers for the police department. The fourth item is 3D laser scanner system for crime scenes. And the fifth item is Chevrolet Impalas. It's a statewide, Georgia statewide contract. This time, I will begin the electronic voting process. Please record your votes. And it passes. Thank you.
And the final item was an add-on. It's the fiscal year 16 annual action plan. We come to you with this every year. We are required to update it with regarding our HUD, CDBG funding. We're asking your approval.
Got a motion and second. Councilor Davis with discussion.
Oh, no, Mayor.
Oh, not on that? Okay,
I'm
all
sorry.
right, good. All right, let's see. We have a motion and second, and discussion is concluded. Please record your votes electronically. Okay, and it passes. Thank you.
That concludes my agenda, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councilor Davis.
Mr. City Manager, do you know, when we just approved some of these statewide contracts, do most all the departments utilize these statewide contracts, whether it's general government or public safety or other departments? Do they all utilize these state contracts, for example, uniforms and things like that?
We do. Now, we do requests for proposals or bids for uniforms, and our uniform provider is local. Is a local vendor. So, but we utilize the statewide contracts for automobiles purchases and any other items that we would need in the government. I will say for automobiles, although we know the bid price for automobiles, pickups and cars and so forth on state contract, we still bid it out so that our locals will have an opportunity to bid against the state contract, and then they get a preference.
And those would be all departments and offices, right?
Yes, because it's
Correct.
administered through our finance purchasing office. All bids are administered by Andrea McCorvey in our finance purchasing division.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. And that concludes the city manager's agenda, so we'll turn it over to the clerk of council at this time.
Madam Mayor and Council, on the clerk's agenda, items 1 through 4 are biographical sketch of individuals to serve on our boards. 5, 6, 7, and 8 are temporary street closing applications for various events throughout the city. Police Department has approved. These are just for the council's information. Item 9, this is a resolution requesting
We've got a motion to approve item 9, which is a resolution to change the schedule of the council meetings for the month of June. All those, and a second by Councilor Huff. All those in favor, please state aye. We've got a motion that the minutes be received. Is there a second? All those in favor, please state aye.
I have an add-on as well. I have a resolution also asking to cancel the July 7th proclamation session.
We've got a motion and second to cancel the July 7th. Is it a proclamation session?
The proclamation resolution session, yes.
Okay, all right, all right. All those in favor, please state aye.
On our board appointments, we received the nominees for to fill the resigned seat of Ms. Sherry Goodrum, and those nominees are Mr. Chris Badcock, Mr. William Woolfolk, and Ms. Shana Young. Do you want to vote or wait until we have a full council? Okay. Councilor Allen? Councilor Baker? Councilor Davis? Councilor Henderson? Councilor Huff? Councilor Thomas? Councilor Pugh? I'm sorry? Young, okay. We do not have enough votes. We'll bring this back at a, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Was Ms. Goodrum the only female?
Yes, I believe so.
So if she's not replaced with a female, there will be no females on the airport.
That is correct. I'm sorry. Please excuse me. That's my mistake. I don't know who those other 3 females are, but
for women on the airport.
I don't know. Madam Clerk, why don't you just check into that
Okay.
and get us back, since it has to come back in any event?
Sure, I'll bring that back. I apologize. On the Board of Family and Children Services, Ms. Tamika Luttrell has been nominated. She can be confirmed.
Second.
Got a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please state aye.
Yeah.
And today, Councilor Henderson is nominating Mr. Lawton Grantham. We will bring this back at our next meeting for confirmation. Hospital Authority, Mr. Paul Todd has resigned. Mr. Mike Welch has been nominated. We need 2 additional.
We have Councilor Davis.
Councilor Barnes has a nominee, the doctor.
Oh, that is correct. I apologize.
I don't want to mispronounce her last name.
Dr. DePaula Agawa.
That's
Yeah, and we'll list that, and we'll need 1 additional nominee for that
And
seat.
then that's with the Hospital Authority, Muskogee Manor.
That is correct.
Correct.
On our Keep Columbus Beautiful Commission, we've outlined all of the seats that will be expiring. Okay.
All right.
Are there any? Are there any others? Okay. Okay. Can I have a motion to go ahead and confirm those district appointments?
We've got a motion and second. All those in favor, please state aye.
Okay. Okay. Are there any others?
And
Mr.
Counselor
Camp?
Davis, did you
Okay.
have one?
Well, I was going to, I guess, any council member can nominate at large. I was going to recommend just the suggested names in the at-large positions. I would nominate them,
Okay.
unless another council member has a
I
nominee.
don't see anybody else in queue if you want to put some names out there.
I'll make that, well, if there's one left, I'll nominate the one.
Okay.
So you're nominating
If not,
Ms.
I'll nominate the rest of them.
Okay. All right. No one has nominated Ms. Bowling and Ms. Tigner, so we'll put you down as
Ms.
well as
Tigner.
tape. Okay? Okay. Yes. Okay. No, yes.
Ms. Portersheff's seat. She's not eligible. Did somebody nominate Ms. Bowling?
Counselor Davis nominated Ms. Bowling. And, yeah, on these other seats, we have to wait at least 1 week before we confirm.
On that large seat for Rodriguez, what you doing with
I'm sorry?
Mr. Rodriguez, Reverend Rodriguez?
Okay.
You nominate him or?
Yes, Counselor Thomas did. I believe that is all. And then on our Retirees Health Benefits Committee, the mayor is nominating Ms. Rhonda Davis. She can be confirmed.
Got a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please state aye.
And we are still working very hard to trying to get a replacement for Ms. Jody Sears on our Taxi Cab Commission. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I think they're working with Peter Bowden, aren't you?
Yes, we
Working
are.
with Peter? All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Does that conclude your agenda?
It does.
Okay.
Just one quick comment relates back to the budget meeting we had, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about funding for the Naval Museum, and I made some comments. I'm not going to rehash the issues, but I didn't mean for it to be in a critical perspective, but more of an explanation that some issues there that are becoming a little bit of a stumbling block to justify additional funding. And I talked with both Mr. Davids, Kendrick and Bob, and explained to them that my intent was not to be critical, but it was to be more of an explanatory situation as to to the issue that we discussed during the budget session. So I probably should have explained it better. That's my fault. I apologize for that if they took it in the wrong light, and I have talked with both of them. And as part of the conversation, it came up that we're going to take a look after we get past the budget at our MOUs. They were drafted back in the 90s. There may be some opportunity for some savings there to review those, and we'll bring those back once we get time and get through all this. But if there's an opportunity for some operational savings, maybe that's just as well as being able, we might not can give them money, but we might can find a way to save them some money. So that's something we'll be looking at as we go forward with their input. So, but that's all.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Before we adjourn, we actually had someone on the public agenda who has been patiently and dutifully sitting here since early this morning. I noticed you, sir, and apparently got up for a restroom break. And so we're not going to hold that against you. If you'd like to come up, Mr. Joey Klein, representing the American Fueling System, and he wants to talk to us about alternative fuels. And sir, you'll have a time limit, but we appreciate you being here.
No, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate you guys as well, and I'm just glad I have the chance to speak with y'all. And I will keep it short because I know you guys have been sitting here for a long time. So the reason that I'm here today, again, my name's Joey Klein. I'm with American Fueling Systems out of Atlanta. The reason I'm here today is really to introduce what we're doing here in Columbus to you guys. Wherever we go, we like to be very close with community leaders. And so we've been doing some work here, and we're actually going to be building something that I think is going to be really beneficial to the city. And really, this is purely informational to introduce what we're doing to y'all. And please, if you have any questions, I'm obviously happy to answer. How many of y'all are familiar with what compressed natural gas is? Show of hands. Ish. Okay. So essentially, it's harnessing natural gas as a transportation fuel. And it's become a trend among truck fleets, bus fleets, municipal vehicles. I mean, really, any organization with some sort of a fleet, from AT&T service vehicles to refuse haulers to school buses, can use natural gas as a transportation fuel when it is compressed and pressurized. So what my company does is we build these natural gas fueling stations around the country, but mainly here in Georgia, with the intent of helping organizations, from a private organization like a Fortune 500 like AT&T to a public organization like DeKalb County Sanitation in Atlanta. If they want to use natural gas, we want to give them a place to fill with natural gas. Does this clicker here control? Okay. So I'm proud to announce that we're going to be building what is the first publicly accessible compressed natural gas filling station in Columbus. Right now, there are about 17 public CNG stations in the state of Georgia. There's about 830 nationwide. And as the second largest city in Georgia, Columbus has been absent, lacking in a public CNG filling stations where, you know, municipal trash vehicles, if they ran on CNG, could fill up. AT&T vehicles parked on Williams Road, advanced disposal vehicles parked on Veterans, right? All these are organizations that are using CNG other places and haven't had the opportunity to do it here in Columbus. We're changing that. This is our site plan. That is about a 1.5 acre lot on Armour Road, just north of Manchester Expressway. So we are right off of exit 7 on 185. This is going to be open to anyone who wants to use it. So truck traffic off of 185, municipal vehicles going throughout the city, or John Q. Public with a Honda Civic that runs on natural gas, anyone can fill up at this facility. I am taking a trip to the engineering department after I meet with you guys to hopefully get our permits ready so we can break ground later this month. We are extremely excited. And we're doing a lot of work with Liberty Utilities here, who obviously already has natural gas vehicles that they use with their own pumps to make this happen. This is what a finished facility looks like. It is meant to look very similar to a public fueling station so that people's habits don't change that much. It's really just something different that's going into their vehicles. Here's a map of where natural gas fueling stations that are open up to the public currently exist in Georgia. Those green ones are open. As you can see, we've got a big cluster around Atlanta, and we've got others that kind of spread out to cover the rest of the interstate system. Yellow means planned, and this is from my organization and other organizations as well. You guys are a yellow dot right now. We're very excited about that so that we can get something on in this city to put you guys on the map as supporting of alternative fuels. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys who are familiar with compressed natural gas understand what the benefits are. It is much cleaner than other fossil fuels, gasoline and diesel. It produces about 25% less carbon dioxide, produces about 95% less particulate matter. We're talking about doing something to clean up our cities and clean up the air that we breathe. It is cheaper than gasoline and diesel. Even at record low gas and diesel prices right now, it is still less expensive for an organization to fill up with natural gas. It's also much more stable. If anyone follows the commodities market, which I don't really know those outside the industry who find that fun besides myself, but it's, you know, because we have so much supply, it's at a very, very stable level so that an organization, whether municipal or private, can know what their fuel costs are going to be for years down the line. We haven't changed the price at our station in Atlanta in 30 months. 30 months. It's domestic. It's much safer.
You just wrap it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, sir.
So, I mean, look, I just wanted to come here and show you guys what we're doing, make you aware of it, and just use it as an economic development tool as you're speaking to your constituents. We're having an event on June 26th at Liberty Utilities office on Victory Drive, 10 to 12 in the morning. We're going to open it up to fleets who want to learn more about how to use this. I'd welcome anyone to come, and if you're interested in more information, here's my information. You can always give us a call.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Huff.
Thank you for being here and being patient. Going north on Armor Road, will the facility be on your right or left-hand side?
It's going to be on the right-hand side.
Right-hand side.
So as you go north, as you just cross over Manchester, you've got, I think, a bookstore on the right. It's
Right.
just after that, before 47th Street.
Okay,
I think I actually included the address. Yeah, 4506 Armor Road.
Okay, okay.
This is going to be finished by October or November. And we're going to have a big grand opening that we hope as many of you guys can come to as possible.
Okay, and June 26th, 10 to 12, Liberty
June
Utilities.
26th is the event here, just to,
Yeah.
you know, have local fleets come. 10 to 12 at 2300 Victory Drive, totally free.
Okay, and that's Liberty Utilities?
Yes, and I'm sure that you have an email address somewhere on the Columbus, Georgia website. I'm happy to send you the link to sign up, and you can send it to as many people as you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Davis.
Going out on a limb, I might put you on the spot, but are you willing to do maybe some satellite stations in order to work with the city possibly in the future?
You're talking about like a private fueling facility to give other areas to fuel up?
We have a lot of vehicles.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. I mean, that's really what we see as the future here. All it takes, it's very much a domino effect with these facilities. You get one in an area, people start to see there's a way to use this fuel, and it accelerates from there. So, I mean, that's really what we do in Atlanta right now.
You're doing partnerships with other cities?
Yeah, so we can own these stations as a portfolio of our own. We can serve as contractor and build them for another entity, or we can do some sort of a public-private partnership. Anything to get people to use the fuel.
Good, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Klein. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Mhm. All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion, a motion to go into executive session for matters of litigation. Is that right, Mr. City Attorney? Great, okay. Is there a second? All those in favor, please state aye. Great, please clear the chambers. Thank you. We have just exited an executive session on matters of litigation. No votes were taken. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please state aye. We will see you next Tuesday. We are adjourned.